Bore da, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's Health and Care Wales Portfolio Delivery Committee. In relation to today's meeting, I'd like to make a few observations before we start. Committee members might not always be looking directly at the camera. We have papers possibly on another screen or printed off, and so they'll be looking at those during the meeting. We're planning on taking a 10-minute break after item 4 on the agenda and hoping to conclude today's meeting by about 12:40. That said, I'll now proceed with the agenda, and apologies for absence. The only one we've received is from Laura Tolley, and everyone else looks to be present. Declarations of interest, I've received nothing in advance, so I'll just pause for a second and see if anybody's got anything they wish to draw to my attention. Okay, good. Let's move on to the consent agenda then. I've received no comments in advance, so we'll just step through the items on the consent agenda and just confirm the recommendations. So the first item is the minutes of the last public meeting, which we're looking to approve, both the public and the abridged private meeting. Has anybody got any observations on the minutes, comments, or amendments they wish to make? Otherwise, we will formally approve. Okay, so we'll approve the minutes. Forward work plan is there for our noting. The committee terms of reference is also there for our noting. We have changed the name of this committee to Portfolio Committee to encompass the fact that some of the things we're now reviewing are products rather than programs. Let's move on to the main agenda. First item is the action log, and there are no outstanding actions. So we move on to the substantive part of our agenda, which is the assurance of the major programs. We've got 3 of these on today's agenda. So I'll hand over to Evan, who will be supported ably by Michelle and others on these 3 updates. Over to you, Evan.
Diolch yn fawr iawn, Cadeirydd. Thank you very much, David. Before Helen, Alison, and Michelle take these next 3 items, 3 large programs which have been challenging in certain aspects, so it's very timely to have them coming here to PDC. I just thought I'd give a brief scene setting on where we are with the Digital Priorities Investment Fund overall, which is the funding mechanism for most of our major programs. As members will recall, there's a pause and review of the DPIF funding programme triggered by the Welsh Government at the beginning of March, and for that reason the DPIF funding was excluded from our remit letter, which we discussed at our last SHA board meeting around about a month ago at the end of March. That's obviously something that we're working very closely with Welsh Government to understand and to try to get through as quickly as possible. So I'll just give 2 updates. One is on what we understand of the timetable and the process for that review, and secondly, how we're responding to that review in each of the individual programs that are subject to it. For context, the DPIF program, the DPIF funding program overall, from a government perspective, is around about £90 million a year, mixed revenue and capital. I think about 50 million revenue and 55 million revenue, I think, and the remainder capital. That funds not just DHEW, but it funds health boards, and it also funds local authorities for the Connecting Care programme particularly. It's not the whole programme which has been paused. Some funding letters have been issued, including particularly to we have a draft for one program, and we're working with government on drafts for others. So I'll just try and walk us through that quickly. The programs that are not in scope are several of the ones actually that we're looking at right now. So LIMS and RISP, EPS, EPMA, and the Welsh Community Care Information System, which is the old legacy WCCIS system. They're not in scope of the review, and we're working with government at the minute on the funding letters for those. Those will be the traditional funding letters as they used to be the year before last, but for 1 year only, rather than what we had in last year's remit letter, which was a sort of a portfolio funding allocation. We're going back to individual funding letters with milestones in each of those letters, which we're agreeing with government. I think that's that's a familiar and a clear and therefore a stable approach, which I think will help all parties to understand where we are, and we'll go through the programs one by one. The remaining programs, and there are several large and very important programs which are not excluded in that way. They include, for example, the NHS Wales app, Connecting Care program, the National Data Resource program. All of those are subject to the review process. Yesterday morning, we returned templates on each of those to the Welsh Government, which are going to be assessed within the next few weeks. We're not sure of the exact date, but those will be sometime during May. And it's the same request that came to us and the same template that also went out to all of the local health boards and trusts and everybody else who receives DPIF funding for programs. And there's been some engagement by the government with the Digital Directors Peer Group and others. Realistically, I don't think we can anticipate an outcome of that review process sooner than June, not just because of the internal governance arrangements within the Welsh Government, the officials team, but also there'll be a new cabinet secretary, there'll be a new government, and whatever recommendations come from officials will be subject to approval by that new cabinet secretary. So for a period of time, we're going to be without certainty on several of our programs. We've looked across the portfolio to have a consistent approach to how do we reflect that in our RAG rating, which we've communicated to digital directors, and we are in the process of picking up with program boards as the program boards meet, because obviously program boards have got a very important role in considering how best to respond to the funding situation. So I'll just finish on that. The first bit is we've confirmed to all of our delivery partners that we are not able to disperse monies onward. Because if we haven't got the money, then we can't disperse it on to our partners, obviously. To give a sense of the scale of this, our total receipts this year for our anticipated total receipts for DPIF, including the changes to EPMA, because EPMA has moved now to route the local funding through DSUW, which is a change from last year, is around about 50 million in total coming to DSUW, and of that 22.5 million goes on to third parties. So there's a very significant pass-through to the wider system, which currently is all on stop, because until we have the money, we can't pass that money onwards, and we'll only be able to do that as and when we receive formal funding letters confirming the allocations to DSUW. The delivery confidence is the second aspect that we've looked at. So for those programs that are not in scope of the review, LIMS, RISP, EPS, EPMA, WCCIS. Until we have the funding letter, we're recommending an assessment of amber red for the resources confidence, which is money and people. But otherwise, it's business as usual. We go through the overall rating and we use the framework in the way that we always use the framework. Program boards will consider that on a program by program basis, and we'll report that in the ordinary way. For the programs that are paused, that is, we have no certainty of funding. We've not had any letter of comfort or indication from Welsh Government, so there's a significant uncertainty. What we know for sure is that the funding is paused and is under review. Those programs will also move into a pause and review status. We'll ask the program boards firstly, we'll ensure that there's no new commitment to funding, because I can't afford to enter into new commitments. We'll ask programs and program teams systematically to look at their existing commitments and to scale back where they're able to do that prudently and reasonably and sensibly. There's not that much scope. There's a lot of employment, there's a lot of contractual commitment and others. But where they can, we will look for programs to do that, which reduces our risk exposure. Obviously, the longer the pause goes on, the more risk exposure there is for DSUW. We'll see how that works out in each one of the programs. While those programs are in a review or a pause mechanism by which they're looking at their delivery plans, they're looking to scale back, we will be reporting a not assessed rating on those, a grey not assessed rating rather than the red rating. That is what we've done. There's no change to the RAG framework. That already is provided for in the RAG framework. That's how we've reported WCIS, while WCIS has been under a pause and review for an extended period of time. So I think it's consistent and it's clear. And it gives us a solid framework, and we're relying on our governance, and we'll be as transparent as we can possibly be about how we're dealing with that, which is why we've broadcast that to the system, and we're taking it through all of the program boards in a consistent manner, and why I'm giving this update here in our public assurance board. So we're continuing to work very closely. To summarize, we're working closely with government to get through this as quickly as we can. There is obviously quite a lot of movement going on at the minute with a new government coming in and the government having triggered the pause and review. hopefully we will come through that collectively as a whole system fairly quickly. It's not going to be within a few days. It's going to be, a few weeks. June at the earliest is our current view. But when we do get there, we'll hopefully be back to a very stable environment. Anticipate we'll be back to funding letters for each program. They will give a very solid grounding for the expectations for each program. In fact, probably more so than last year. And then that will enable us to speed up again. From June and July. So hopefully that's helpful as general context, not only for the 3 assurance reports, but for the major programs report, which we'll be discussing after the break.
Okay, no, that's a pragmatic approach. The observation I'd make is if we're pausing some programs for a period of a couple of months, possibly longer, that will have an impact on the plan timescales for delivery around those. So there will need to be a little bit of replanning once that's happened. Yeah. Okay. Unless anybody's got any questions for Even, let's move on to the first of the assurance reports then.
Yeah, thank you, David. I'm going to be very brief and introduce Helen Thomas. So Helen is our portfolio lead, not to be confused with our chief executive, but our other Helen Thomas, who I'm really pleased is the portfolio lead for our urgent and emergency care initiatives, which includes the Welsh Intensive Care Programme that Helen has been leading. So she's going to take us through the annual review for that programme. Thanks, Helen.
Okay.
Thanks, Michelle. I'm just going to share my screen. Is everyone able to see that?
Yes, thank you.
Thank you. As Michelle describes, I'll take you through the Welsh Intensive Care Information System update. So as a brief overview of the programme, the objective is to deliver a modern digital ICU system for Wales by completing the build, validation and implementation planning. So the work streams include broadly technical assurance group, clinical assurance group, an implementation group and contract management. And the intent is to support safer, standardised intensive care documentation and data flows nationally. So that would include all ICUs throughout Wales. So in terms of the summary position, although initial configuration testing revealed some significant patient safety concerns, and this led to a pause, and Welsh Government commissioned a review which outlined that despite the fact that the system couldn't be implemented as is, with some remediation, they were assured that it could be implemented safely. So as a result of the review, the recommendations have been addressed through strengthened governance. We've revised the governance structure quite significantly, and clinical engagement has changed. We've appointed some new clinical, local and national leads, and feel that's really strengthened the programme. We submitted an agreed proposal for progression of the programme, and this was shared with the Welsh Government in September 2025. So in January 2026, Welsh Government then requested that the programme obtain an agreed scope for phase 1 of the implementation by the 16th of March. So this resulted in quite a lot of activity within the programme that had been paused for a period of a few months. However, the programme succeeded in engaging the wider clinical community, and then subsequently agreement by our clinical assurance group, technical assurance group and programme board, and we included also letters of support from Health Board chief execs, and submitted that by the required date of 16th of March to the DDAP board. Right, so in terms of the key challenges, following the issues found during testing, the team worked with clinical leads to engage widely with the clinical community. However, I think the continual checkpoints and the prolonged pauses have presented some challenges in maintaining that engagement. In reality, we've had periods of intense activity where engagement has been quite significant, and then prolonged pauses. And then in terms of Health Board participation, Health Board commitment responses to date have been based on 5 Health Boards continuing. The challenge we've had is that I think if we don't have those 5 Health Boards in the room as we're making the decisions, this presents challenges in terms of having a voice from all of the decision making. So BCU, however, have again agreed to participate in team meetings and to have engaged further with us over the last couple of months, and indeed we've had a letter of commitment from the BCU Chief Exec, which has been I think quite a leap in terms of their commitment, given the prolonged period of absence from the programme. I think it's very strong commitment that they are willing to engage again with the programme. And then finally, there's a risk of the current position that we are in terms of funding and progression of the programme, and DHW have an escalation to PDC in relation to that at the moment. In terms of strategic and policy alignment, I won't go through the entire thing, but the WIC demonstrates strong strategic fit. It directly supports strategies such as Wales's national health ambitions, critical standards and critical care improvement priorities. It also demonstrates strong strategic fit, and it supports several strategies and plans, including informed health and care and delivery plan for the critically ill. I think more crucially, it also replaces error-prone paper records and standardises practice across Wales. I think ICUs, possibly more than many other departments within healthcare, have a large volume of paper, and it's an extremely intense paper process that they operate under currently. In terms of the plan, we've taken the plan here for the purposes of this meeting from May 2025. That's the point at which the programme was began re-engaging with clinicians following the outcome of the review. And we had a series of workshops again to re-engage with clinicians, and we took the opportunity to re-engage with the wider community. And the purpose of this was to both take on board the suggestions from the review around how the system and the programme should progress, but also to engage widely to see if there were any other items of feedback and requirements from our clinical community. A document was submitted and an options paper, and it was agreed by our clinical assurance group and our programme board to progress with a phased implementation of the system. This was submitted to Welsh Government by September 2025, the required date. We were then asked by Welsh Government on the 23rd of January to obtain agreement on what phase 1 of implementation would look like. We were asked to specify what would be in that phased implementation. So again, as you can see, there's an intense period of activity here where we again re-engage with the clinical community. We took on board feedback and we produced a document that was agreed by our clinical assurance group, technical assurance group, programme board, and we also obtained letters of support from chief executives. And just by means of an illustration of that, so our phased approach as the way forward, it kind of takes on board potentially safer, faster incremental delivery. It enables us to realise benefits at an early stage. We took on board feedback around the system being quite complicated, and this would alleviate some of that. And it works to a two-phased approach, and that was through engagement not only with our clinicians but with the supplier as well, who suggested that other health organisations that their system has been implemented into has also taken this kind of an approach. In terms of the benefits forecast, the original business case had quite substantial financial benefits that were documented. We did take the view that we wanted to relook at some of these, and the clinical community have outlined that we would likely need to look in greater detail at benefits around drug spend, and that's in light of decisions around the use of the drugs module within the system. However, they renewed their support for the benefits around clinical outcomes and safety, around time and workflow efficiencies, and around data and resource optimization. So recognising that as we progress, we would need to look in more detail around these. I think an initial review concluded that both the board and clinicians remain in support largely of the significant benefits that follow this system. As mentioned previously, we've reviewed the governance of the programme quite substantially, taken on board feedback from stakeholders and the review. And we believe that we have a strengthened governance system. It's supported by good engagement from our users, but also that clear differentiation between the feedback that we get from users and the decision-making point. And we have introduced a revised clinical assurance group on that basis, and we have national and local clinical leads representing their users, and the introduction of an implementation planning group. And we also have an updated terms of reference for all of these groups. And this is just an illustration of that and how each item feeds into the other. And then in terms of key successes, I'm conscious that in terms of the plan and progress, we haven't necessarily moved forward, but I think as a programme, I believe that there's been quite a lot of key successes in the last couple of years in particular. I think we've moved from a position where there wasn't a huge volume of confidence that we would be able to move forward to a position where clinical leads and clinicians throughout Wales are enthusiastic about the system and they want to move forward. So the clinical leadership has really impacted that. I think some of the clinicians who are leaders were previously clinical leads in the programme, and they have renewed their commitment, I think, to the programme. We've re-engaged with the wider clinical community, and I think in terms of the strategic alignment, we've met every single deadline, every single milestone that has been asked of us as a programme, and we've done so with full agreement from the clinical community and the digital community. We've also maintained that relationship with the supplier. It strengthened it, in fact, I believe. They've agreed to work in a slightly different way, a more modern way that ensures that our users have a good voice in terms of how we progress. And then the national commitment, again, renewed during the recent milestone that we were asked to complete. And I would say frontline buy-in. So we were able to complete a demonstration of the system with colleagues in Italy who had implemented the web version of the system, and I think it's fair to say that there was quite a lot of positivity following that demo, and again, renewed commitment and I think a view that it could most certainly be implemented and done so successfully. And that concludes. Diolch.
Okay, thank you, Helen. Any questions for Helen or Wickets? Ruth.
Thanks for that update, Helen. I just want to check in relation to Health Board commitment on this. So we've got 4 health boards which have provided actual confirmation that they're going to proceed. And is that unconditional confirmation? They're happy to go ahead as the plan is currently.
We have now had 5 health boards, so BCU have also confirmed, in fairness. In terms of unconditional, I think their responses were conditional upon aspects such as aspects of the implementation. So as an example, I think they wanted to ensure that blood gases were included in phase 1 implementation. So those kind of stipulations were within the health board commitment responses, but they've also been included in the paper that we provided, because we were clear that it's not always as clear cut as a table with items that we're going to include in phase 1. We wanted to make sure that every single item of feedback that we had, both from the CAG and the TAG, and the programme board for that matter, were included in that documentation. So yes, that their responses included those nuances, and they were included within our paper also.
Okay, and that was my follow-up about BCU, actually, because I wasn't clear whether they have actually provided confirmation that they will proceed, or whether it was just confirmation that they'll re-engage, which are potentially 2 different things.
Michelle looks like she wants to come in on this one.
I wanted to be clear, because I think that's the key point. So BC have confirmed they'll re-engage with the programme. They haven't committed to implement the phase 1 scope, which is the commitment that has been provided by the other health boards, although from the chief executive in BCU, so at a very senior level, they've said they will re-engage and they're keen to move forward with the programme. I think you're right. I think that does fall short of saying they will definitely commit. But as Helen indicated in her presentation, they've got a way to go to catch up now with their clinicians, because they haven't been participating to date. So we've got a plan, we've got a session coming up, I think Helen, isn't it, at the end of May, where the clinical leads and some of the members of the programme team will go up to BCU, and they'll have a session. They have nominated someone to join the programme board, so they are certainly indicating that they wish to be involved, but they haven't made that firm commitment. And can I just say, the other key caveat that has come back from, I think, all of the health boards is around the funding position. So they are keen to understand whether there will be Welsh Government funding available for the implementation phase of the programme. So we've identified a funding requirement to Welsh Government, and that currently funds the solution, it funds the clinical leads. So we have national clinical leads who are members of the NHS who work on the programme and are funded. It funds resources in the health boards to support implementation and other things. So they've all kind of also included that in their responses, that they're keen to understand whether that would be available. The health boards will then pick up the operational costs of the solution as it moves forward.
Okay, thank you. And so how long do BCU need to get into a position where they can provide their confirmation that they will implement the solution? Yeah, and what does that do to our overall implementation timeline?
I think so we haven't had that conversation specifically with BCU yet. I think that would be a good conversation to have following the May session, when we can get a real sense of where their clinicians are, and how comfortable they now are to move forward. I think is probably quite a tricky question for them at this point, having not been engaged. What does that mean to the overall timeline? When I think it depends on the decision about whether we can move forward at this point. So my sense is, if we move forward with the programme and we engage BCU and all the other health boards, then they will have the opportunity, and it may be that they make the decision that they will be the last organisation to implement. So that would be fine. And I think the level of clinical commitment, I just want to acknowledge the work that Helen and Rachel, who's our project manager, and the whole team have done. We've got a really high level of clinical commitment right now, which is really positive, which is a recovery position, because obviously we're on pause for quite a long time actually, and clinicians, perhaps they've gone back to their day jobs, haven't they? It's not going to happen, and they're now really re-engaged. I think what will be key now is, can we maintain that momentum and move forward, or is there going to be a further period of no activity, which will be a challenge for us, I think.
So assuming all those things line up, and we have the 5 health boards, the commitment, and they're all happy with the funding position, when do we expect to start realising benefits on this programme?
I think that'll be following implementation. I think there are some specific timelines in the benefits documentation suggested around when we might want to, when we might be in a position to realise those benefits. And clearly we need to profile those against how we phase 1 and phase 2, because clearly they would align with those. But I think in terms of realising the benefits, some of them could be virtually, instantaneous as soon as the system is implemented. I'm not sure if anybody has seen the documentation that ICU clinicians complete on a regular basis. It's a huge volume, and A1 sheet that it takes up time. It's prone to human error. In terms of what clinicians do on a regular basis, there's huge mental load in that, so it's hugely worth doing. And I think although we can document the quantitative benefits there, the qualitative will also follow, and I think will be fairly soon realised. But I do recognise where BCU are coming from. They've been absent from the programme, and we're asking them to go from 0 to 100 in a very short space of time. So I think if we continue the mechanism and what we've been doing with our clinicians from around Wales, I'm confident that we can bring them on board. But I'm also conscious that we can't expect them to do that instantaneously. I think it will take some time.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Maureen.
Thanks. Well, Ruth slightly sort of pitched in on the question I had in terms of benefits realisation. You talked about the approach being modified over the last few years in terms of establishing the benefits. It's clear from what you say there are going to be quantitative benefits, presumably potentially productivity improvements as well. But if this is a national system, and if we don't get that buy-in from BCU, for instance, that's going to impact the benefits that we can assign from this project.
It's an interesting point, actually, because despite the fact that the benefits relate financial and qualitative benefits, there isn't anything documented currently that relates to the benefit of it being a national system and our ability to move patients between care settings and kind of keep that continuity of care. That isn't documented in there, and something that our clinicians spoke about actually was, do we want to add that in, because they feel that it is particularly for the South Wales area where patients do move between those health boards, it is something that's absolutely worth documenting, and the system provides that capability in a fairly unique way. There aren't many systems out there that would enable that kind of transfer between sites, and that is something that we would only get as part of a Wales-wide implementation.
Obviously, the North Wales position is slightly different. There are more cross-border issues in North Wales than you would get within South Wales. So that would clearly impact their ability to deliver quantitative and qualitative benefits, presumably.
As far as as far as patients moving between, but the benefits that we have are related specifically per health board. It doesn't really currently bring that into play. So in theory, it wouldn't necessarily.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Evan.
Thanks. I really welcome the discussion on benefits. It's something that as that we've discussed at the SHA board. It's something that we want to move towards. I just want to dwell for a moment on the use of the word we. This is a DHCW portfolio delivery committee, but most of our conversations are about us acting on behalf of the system. And when we use we mean the whole of the NHS in Wales.
Yeah.
The benefits from WICIS almost entirely accrue to clinicians in health boards, to patients, obviously, from improved outcomes and improved care and decisions, and to health boards as system providers and service delivery providers from efficiency, and very few, actually, to DHCW. I think some of that reflects that the business case originally was drafted by the chief execs collectively as a collaborative, so it came from a whole system perspective. Where there are benefits that are specific to DHCW, they're probably in the comparison between a single national system and multiple local systems. In a single national system, we've got one integration, which is that national system to the other national systems, whereas if there are many different systems in use across Wales, all of those have to be integrated, and very often they have to be integrated to each other when patients move from one organisation to another, and about 20% of patient journeys are across health board boundaries. So I think the DHCW benefits, when we use we to mean DHCW, in most programs, they're actually quite limited, and they're quite technical in nature about cost efficiency savings from that sort of integration and management of services. They're nearly always out there in the system, and they follow the successful implementation of whatever that digital product is. The earlier you can complete that implementation, obviously, the sooner the benefits start to flow, and the larger in aggregate the benefits are. So it is it's very much in the health board's court. WICIS is to their benefit more than it is to our benefit. We are there to support and to provide a single digital solution, ideally, to support their activities and to deliver benefits for them that they would realise.
Okay. Thank you for that context, Ewan. Helen, just before I let you go, I've got one question. So, what's the remaining timeline for phase 1, and at what point does the funding for phase 2 need to kick in if we're going to have continuity?
So we haven't received any funding yet. And that clearly impacts our ability to accurately plan how long phase 1 and how long phase 2 would be. However, the clinical community have been really clear that they don't want to hold much time between both phases. I think they referenced around a maximum of around 6 months between phase 1 implementation and phase 2. What we've also done is provided within the suggested timescale to ensure that they are able to sign off prototypes of the required changes for phase 2 before we even implement on phase 1. So it's a very tight timescale and a quick turnaround, and our suppliers have really engaged with us on that to ensure that they're able to deliver that, and they already have a team that's ready and waiting to go.
Okay, thank you for that. Ruth?
Sorry, I just wanted to touch on the health boards that are not joining into this system currently. I mean, obviously Powys doesn't have any intensive care provision, so who is out, and are they permanently out, I guess is my question, or will they join at a later date?
So I think we've discussed BCU. The only other health board would be TAF, and that's purely because they already had a system in ICU, and during the first period of pause, they had to just had to go through the process of recontracting because the contract had come to an end. So they have extended their contract, so they are currently unable to participate because they already have an ongoing contract with the supplier. With regards to permanently being out, I guess that's not a question for the here and now. I think they would need to evaluate that as they draw near to the end of their current contract. Okay, thanks, Helen. Let's draw this bit to a conclusion. Thanks for this update and for responding to the questions. Okay, back to Michelle. Which one are we going to next? Michelle, LIMS or RISP?
Thank you, David. Well, first of all, I'm gonna hand off again. So I'm also really pleased that Alison Maguire, who will be familiar, I'm sure, to colleagues around the table, has also joined us. So thank you to Helen, and welcome to Alison. So Alison also leads one of our portfolios. She's the portfolio lead for diagnostics. She's also the program director for the laboratory and the radiology programs. She's a superstar. So I think, Alison, I'll leave it to you in terms of order. I think we have a sequence, but I think you're going to share some slides with us as well and run through both of those programs for us. So I'll hand over to Alison. Thanks, David.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm having technical issues again, as Helen did, as my presenting Teams has failed.
Ah.
So hold on, let me try again. No, let me close. And I will attempt again. It will, no.
Alison, just as a backup, I've certainly got the meeting pack open on my laptop with the slides in it. So if you want to talk to the slides, we can, and just let us know when you're moving on. We can follow from the meeting book if you want.
I will do that. Okay, so when it opens. So if I am on the second slide, so good morning, everybody. As it noted, my name's Alison Maguire, and we use the term challenging a lot, and I actually think the word challenging was invented for the LIMS programme, as it is very, very challenging. So just some background, as we discussed before, we took on this programme when the link contract was stopped in August last year as a result of the failed procurement, and we brought in evoked the contingency plan, which was an extension to the legacy programme, and that was now it was a 4-year programme reduced into 2 years. We're now in year 3 of this programme, so it was what we're calling a recovery mission. So we've got less time, there's more pressure on the resources, as we've noted before, and this is a multi-year programme. It's a complex programme in terms of all the configuration and testing and implementation, because when you implement this, it takes a month to implement it for each discipline across all of Wales. And I'm on the next slide now, which is slide 3, which just shows the a picture of LIMS, what we're calling the lab digital brain. And this is just to explain the complexities of LIMS. So when we say it's challenging, this is the reason why it's challenging. As you can see, we have 38 labs. We've got nearly 8,000 locations. We've got over 2,000 tests. This is a big, complex system, and I think that explains why we're having some of the challenges that we have with the LIMS programme. So if I can just bring people up to speed. So we were due to complete end of March this year. Unfortunately, due to the volume of defects and volume of changes in the extended UAT, that's not happened. So the programme has now extended out to the end of September. So we did go live in January this year with cellular pathology across Wales, and that was a huge effort by all involved. So we've gone live with cellular pathology across the whole of Wales, and we're rolling out mortuary at the moment across the individual health boards. So that we're doing that individually because each health board has winter pressures, as they're called. They're coming out of the winter pressures. So we are rolling out mortuary individually with each health board as they can take it. So we've rolled out to an Iron Bevan, and we're in the process at the moment of rolling out to BCU. And the intention is that we'll have rolled out microbiology, blood sciences and blood transfusion by the end of September this year. So the programme at a glance. So as we noted, we haven't what we're classing as a number of tranches. So I'm on slide 5 now, in case just so people follow me. We have a number of tranches because we split them into tranches, and tranche 1 was our technical tranche, and that went live last year in October, and that was to set everything up in the system. So all the technical elements, all the interfaces, everything was live then, and that was to enable us to have a smoother, faster adoption of the system, which definitely worked with CellPath, because we went into a health board a week. And it was a really smooth implementation, and that going live with the technical element first is helping, you know, drive that smoother adoption and make it quicker, because we've tested a number of elements out beforehand. In terms of my Teams is just about to crash, I think. Oh, apologies for this. I think I'm coming back now if I've lost you, but hopefully you can still hear me.
Yep, I can still hear you.
You can, thank you. Yep. Yeah, the programme at a glance, that was slide 5. So as we noted, the different technical elements, so the different tranches, and our extended plan, as I noted, which now extends to the end of September 2026, it has incurred significant additional costs. So we have requested that Welsh Government fund these additional costs, but if Welsh Government are unable to fund them, then it will be split between DHCW and all our organisations. I'm going to move on to slide 6 now. So that shows our programme governance, and I'll go through, there's quite a difference between the programme governance for LIMS and the programme governance for RISP. So in terms of LIMS, we have a national team in place run by DHCW, and we manage the entire programme, and the contract we have the contract with the supplier, so it's DHCW and the supplier. So our national team looks after the contract and liaises with the supplier. In terms of clinical support, so we have what we call a national clinical standardisation strategy group, and that is full of clinicians from every health board, and the chair of that is a clinician from Swansea Bay. So any of our trickier decisions or escalations go to CSSG. We also have discipline leads and standardisation leads in place across pathology. They're run by the service, so each discipline has their own standardisation lead, and they have individual what we call SAGs, and these are specific standing scientifically advisory groups, and again they make the decisions on the configuration for the system. And again, that is challenging because we have to bring everybody together, and that has contributed to some of the delays that we've had, because we need to gain consensus from the whole of Wales when we're doing some of that configuration. And in terms of the governance, we have the DHCW Portfolio Oversight Management Board, we have a programme board, and we have what we're calling the Testing, Task and Finish group. That meets every week, and that's where we go through the project plan and the testing of the system and the configuration. So we discuss everything to do with the implementation at that meeting, and all health boards are represented at that meeting. And then each health board has its own programme board. So every health board has a programme board, and they feed into our Testing, Task and Finish group, and then into the national programme board. I'm now on slide 7. So in terms of benefits, now a lot of the benefits for a single LIMS were realised first time round. So when we went live with LIMS first time, a number of those big benefits of having a national LIMS were realised then. But this LIMS now, and again, this is a recovery plan, so we haven't got all the benefits that we originally planned with the original procurement, but there are still quite a number of benefits. We're further standardising the system. So even though we talked about having a minimal viable product and doing a lift and shift, that actually hasn't happened. An awful lot of development has been done on this system, and an awful lot of future standardisation. So I think the Liver plan is another key one. That is a UK initiative, and that wasn't in place in the LIMS 1, but we've brought that into LIMS 2 because it is so significant for NHS Wales. So a liver plan is a new initiative we put in, as is a kidney infection, a new kidney infection plan. So we have further standardised this system to help. So there's been a lot of standardisation going on. It's also helped us with our accreditation. So each health board is accredited by UCAS, And because we've taken a different approach, and UCAS have taken a different approach now, so they've separated out. So UCAS, and this is a first for us in DHCW and a first for us in NHS Wales, UCAS came to DHCW site. Now, they can't actually accredit DHCW, however, they came and we supported that accreditation. So CUMTAF went through their accreditation. So UCAS took the approach that they accredited the local elements at the health board, and then they came to us and they accredited the national elements. And we had a really, really good report from UCAS and noticed how well the implementation had been run, how well the programme had been run, the quality aspects of it. So that again is a new thing and brand new to UCAS as well. So I think that has really helped, and we had good feedback from CUMTAF that it did help their accreditation exercise as well. Also, the LIMS 2, the supplier is hosting the infrastructure. So that takes some of the burden on NHS Wales. So they'll manage the validation of the system and they'll be managing the system. So we've shifted quite a lot of activity over to the supplier. So that's helped. And we've also got income from external tests. So there's something called MPEX that health boards use, because health boards do external tests for other agencies, and that is an income to them, which helps with their costs on the lab. I'll move to slide 8. Now, this is the programme structure. So the supplier have a certain model that they run for their implementation. They call it ARIES, and it's very, very structured. So they have like the discovery, which they did beforehand, and then we go into launch, setup, adoption, and sustain. And that is the process we're going through. We're in a combination now of launch, in a combination of setup and adoption and sustain, because obviously we've gone live with cellular pathology, so that's live. So they're doing sustain, so that's in BAU for cellular pathology, and mortuaries moving into BAU, but we are still in the setup phase for microbiology, although it's coming near to the end, blood sciences and blood transfusion. So it's mixed across it, but the supplier has a very structured program delivery model, which you'll see in the slide deck. If I go to slide 9 now, which is the deployment timeline. So as we noted, the tranche 1 went live in October 2025, and again, that was purposeful. That we did that to make a smoother transition for the remaining disciplines, and it has worked really well. So all that technical activity happened in tranche 1. So all the national interfaces were stood up to save time. Tranche 2, which was cell path and andrology, that went live across Wales in Jan and Feb. Our next go live is microbiology, and that is again across Wales. So that's run by Public Health Wales. So they're leading heavily on this implementation. And then we've got blood sciences, which is our biggest and most complex implementation, just because of the volume of the tests. And that is the one that is causing us a lot of challenge. And then we've got blood transfusion. Again, blood transfusion is a challenge as well. It's highly regulated, and the health boards are coming off legacy systems that they have been on for 30 years. So we've got data migration to do from systems and data and some of the data is actually over 40 years old. So the blood transfusion, again, because of that shift from legacy data systems 30 years old to out to the LIMS 2, again, is a challenge. And not all health boards are taking the new LIMS for blood transfusion. So Aneurin and Bevan purchased their own blood transfusion system a number of years ago, and Cardiff and Vale chose to upgrade their legacy system. So Cardiff and Vale and Aneurin and Bevan will not be moving on to LIMS 2 for blood transfusion, but the remaining health boards will. I'm now going to move on to slide 10, which is the key challenges. So some key points on that. It was noted when we did this that the timelines would be challenging, and we needed a different approach, and that was we wanted to minimize configuration, we wanted to minimize what we were doing, and we did talk about that, what we call minimal viable product. Unfortunately, we haven't managed that minimal viable product because there's been a number of changes that have been requested that have had to be delivered. by the supplier, and a number of configuration changes had to be delivered. So we really do need to get this over the line. Resources need to be prioritised to get this over the line, and that is a challenge in the health boards because they've all got their day jobs. So it's really, really tricky at the moment. It's been really difficult to manage or control the configuration changes because we haven't got sight of all the changes, because some of them are ongoing changes as things happen. So in reality, that it's been really difficult to control those configuration changes. And when we get new requests in around the liver plan that is a big initiative, then the feeling is actually this is something we need to do. So that's been really difficult. And then, as noticed, we're in the delay. So in the programme board in November, we recognised that we would not complete by the end of March. So the revised plan was put in place, and that's where we've moved to out to September with those significant risks. And again, as noted, we've asked Welsh Government to provide that funding, but if not, then it will have to be met across our organisation and all the health board organisations. I'm now on slide 11. So going back to the key challenges, this is a highly specialist system. So the resources are really specialist, and there are not many of them around. Some health boards only have one person in that health board that understands some of the specialist services, and they're also trying to do a day job, and that's across and into systems as well. Our supplier, they've got specialist resources, they've brought additional specialist resources in to support this, but it really is a challenge because it is so specialist. And like I say, some health boards might have one or two people across that health board that have these skills and knowledge. The other aspect to the delays in the system were defects. So, and although we use the word defects, some of these defects are actual changes, but they're logged as defects. There are genuine things that don't work in the system that are having to fix, but there are also a number of changes because it just doesn't work the way that we need it to work. But there have been a large number of defects, and we're having to fix. I mean, with microbiology in the last 3 weeks, I think our supplier have fixed 50 new defects or changes that have been identified as part of the user acceptance testing. So that's the volume that we're dealing with. And as noted, there have been a number of solution changes. So into this product, 262 of them were delivering additional functionality, and there's a further 23 developments planned. And we've had 22 software patches and 70 contractual change notes have been submitted. That is huge change, and I think that goes to why this is taking a lot longer than we all envisaged. And talking about the legacy data, again, that, as discussed for blood transfusion, we are taking data from health board legacy systems, and some of that data is 40 years old. All the systems have been configured differently. In health boards, they have multiple systems for running, for example, blood transfusions. So some health boards have got 3 systems, all configured differently, all separate. So again, that has been a huge effort to try and get that across the line. In terms of, I'm now on slide 12. So in terms of programme-wide final next steps, so we are agreeing the plan at the moment, and prioritisation of resources is key. We have brought in additional external support for blood transfusion. So Welsh Blood Service have supported us as well. They've brought additional people in to do data migration testing, and we're also trying something new, which is bringing in external resource to help with the testing. So to help with that issue of the limited capacity in health boards, and that's working well. And ideally, I mean, we discussed this a while ago with Welsh Government about the issues with user acceptance testing. That is one of the areas where we always find it difficult, because really you need dedicated continuity on user acceptance testing. That is difficult for health boards to do because they're doing their day job. So we did explore a while ago with Welsh Government that it would be ideal to bring these external resources in, like a separate dedicated user acceptance testing team at the beginning of a programme. So they understand the programme, they understand the product, and that would give us security and more confidence in dates. It's really difficult to plan dates when you can't get an end date on your user acceptance testing. So we're trying that to a certain extent in blood transfusion. There's nervousness from health boards because they're nervous. They own the service. They have to sign it off. They're responsible for it. So when you bring additional external people in, there is that nervousness there of making sure the quality is adhered to and the governance. So we're working very closely with them on this, but it is something that we would like to expand for use for other programs to give us confidence in dates. Because in my experience, it's always user acceptance testing that elongates the plan, because there's defects, they need to retest them, they need to refix them, and they have to do other, they've got a day job. So we really want to explore and expand that more. So as we noted, the next steps, microbiology, adoption in Q1. So we're working with micro now on the final elements, and then blood science and blood transfusion. There's a new requirement has been identified by the health boards, and that's around legacy system archive and the programme closure, which we know we need to do. We've taken across some legacy data, and that was agreed in the scope back in August 2023. So we took across some legacy data. But what the health boards have identified as a new requirement is actually they need access to all their data, and they need real-time access to their data. In the scope, it was some data was migrated into the system, and then the plan was that the supplier would copy the data and the legacy data, host it on their infrastructure, and we would be able to access it by queries, what we call ODBC. What the health boards have noted is that that isn't sufficient for them. They need real-time access. They need to be able to go in 24/7 and look at legacy data. That won't deliver that. So we are now looking at this, but it is a challenge, and it will incur additional costs because it was not in the scope. So that's a new thing that we really are looking into at the moment. I'm now on slide 13. So in key successes, as I've spoken about before, the technical go live, that was planned so it would smooth adoption. It absolutely worked with CellPath, cellular pathology. That worked because all that work was done ahead of the game. Again, we have done data migration. So we've migrated all cervical screening data, all CellPath data, and a subset of biochemistry data into the new system. As noted, our Tranche 2 go live, which was CellPath andrology across Wales, and mortuary go live at Iron Bevan. Since these slides were put together, we've gone live this week with BCU, and they've taken the full mortuary, and Iron Bevan took a subset of it. BCU have taken the full mortuary. And we're going to go to slide 13 now, 14, which is just use the stakeholder and feedback. And as you say, the move of cellular pathology into TCL was a real smooth implementation. We did a health board a week, well, two in 1 week, so it was done in 4 weeks. And BCU with a last to go live, and there's a quote there from Amanda Savage, who is the specialist service manager for cytology in BCU, a very honest feedback, but I think that just goes to show how this product is received once it's in, and it is a real push now to get the remaining disciplines live. So that is the end of my presentation for LIMS.
Thanks, Alison. You've gone through an awful lot there. Can I go to Evan first for questions?
Thank you very much, David. So first, I want to thank Alison for that presentation. Our job here is to be assured about the governance and the management and the delivery of programs. We are, as an organisation, trying to make that more transparent, more public, so that stakeholders can take confidence in the management of those programs. And I think that presentation should help anybody watching to firstly understand the complexity and the scale and the multifaceted nature of this program, and also to take confidence from the detail and the grip and the understanding of what is in there. The thing that I want to emphasize is that we are, as an organization and as a program, we are trying to be as responsive as we possibly can to the needs of health boards as our key delivery partners, stakeholders and customers. And We're working with them, obviously. Testing capacity in health boards has been a challenge throughout the last year and a half, but that is in the wider context of a program that was reset during its progress. It is running alongside RISP. If you take the two programs together, it's the largest diagnostics transformation and replacement program in the whole of Europe, and it's running at a pace which is much faster than you would ordinarily see these types of programs running. And it really is a challenge and a stress on the system, because on top of diagnostics, there's also things like EPMA and maternity and other programs going on. So it is a real pressure on digital teams right across our organisation, but all the other NHS Wales organisations too. And I think, and I've said before, and I want to take this opportunity to say it again, that I'm really, really proud of the work that is being done on this. The final thing I just flag is the very recent request for a significant amendment of scope to the programme about the access to the legacy data. We will do all that we can to respond, to understand the health board requirement, to consider options for how that can be met, and to find the most cost efficient and the most value for money way of doing that. It is outside the scope of the original programme, and the scope of the original programme was carefully worked through with all of the health boards. It was developed in the NHS Wales Collaborative. I was part in government at the time. I was part of the OBC and the FBC process. It's disappointing that it was not included in scope and that it's come through at such a late stage only a few weeks ago, when we're in the very, very final steps of completing this huge program. And I think we'll all be aware of the amount of governance scrutiny that there has been on LIMS for the last 9 months, 12 months. It's been discussed at digital directors, at chief execs, at the National DDAT Leadership Board, monthly returns to government, program board. There's been so much eyes on this, and for this kind of very substantial request to come out at such a late stage is quite a challenge for the team. So the team will continue to focus on executing to the scope, the original intended scope of the program, and then alongside that, we will be working over the next few weeks as quickly as we reasonably can to understand the requirements, ways that we can meet that requirement, and what that would mean. But I don't want to. I want to emphasise it was not at all in the original scope, and so that's something very big to digest at such a late stage, which we're going to have to take a sort of a mitigation approach to. The last thing we want to do is to compromise the main programme by becoming distracted at this late stage. So the main focus remains to execute tranches 1 to 5, and then to work out how we can meet this additional requirement, which may be through a tranche 6 requirement bolted on, maybe a separate thing, but we're going to have to work through that. And we've not reached a conclusion yet. We need to work through options with our partners and be as responsive as we can to them.
Okay, thanks for that additional context, Evan. Chris.
Thanks, David. Yeah, it's just in the context of that additional request and some of the learning from escalation, for us, and it was reflected in our remit letter to make sure we're escalating quickly as we get changes to programs. So it's just a question for Alison, Michelle and Evan around, are Welsh Government aware of this? Have we escalated this change at this late stage? Because I want to be clear, if it's changed to the scope of the programme, it needs to be escalated, and the system needs to be aware of it and where it's come from.
I think, Evan, I've provided some bullet points, I think, going to Welsh Government with the additional request, so they're aware of the additional request.
Yeah, and it's been discussed at the programme board, Chris, as you would expect, and government are aware. But as I said, this is 2 weeks, 3 weeks, is it? Something like that. It's not a long time at all. So, we've not had time to work through a proper options appraisal to do that. The team is at full stretch, and not just the DHCW team, but the whole system team, let's call it, the One Wales team or something, is at full stretch. On the go lives, Alison has just given an update of the sequence of go lives. We've got a packed calendar. So everyone's keeping that front and centre, and we'll get through this as quickly as we can. So government are aware, but we've not engaged with them, formally in a projecty kind of way to consider those options yet.
Okay. That's reasonable, given that it's going to take time to, but on the basics of we've hit a problem, it's out of scope, we need to come up with a solution which isn't funded. Those basics are known to Welsh Government, correct? Okay, fine. One last question before we move on to RISP, please, Alison. So one of the things that we picked up at the public accountability meeting was some concern by Welsh Government about flagging up timeliness of these type of issues. What was the trigger for this becoming the solution we had agreed on many years ago when we rescoped the project? What was the trigger? Why is it now the solution we had in scope no longer acceptable to the health boards? What triggered that? Is it the delay in doing what you suggested was the way to retrieve legacy data?
So microbiology have got one of the biggest requests in, and they flagged around the issue. So the supplier is going to take a copy of all the data, but using a query. And what the health boards have noted is they need real-time access. They are 24/7, and they want to be able to copy and paste information from one system to another. And I think once they went through it and realised that to actually try and write queries over a huge database to get the information they need just wouldn't deliver what they needed for their operational needs. Okay. And I think also I think there was they didn't understand about how some of that would work. Okay. So I think once they've actually got into really understanding the new system, they've gone, actually, this isn't going to work for us. Because okay. Yeah.
Okay, fine. All right. Unless there's any more questions for Alison, I'll say thank you, Alison, for the update. Good luck with the next couple of quarters of work that you've got lined up. And with that said, can we move on to RISP, please?
Yeah, I came out of my PowerPoint completely.
Okay.
So it's now working.
Excellent, good. Yeah. I can see it. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. So so we'll talk about the radiology system. So just a little bit of background about what the radiology system is. So there's a number of elements to this. So there's what we call the PACS, and that's the imaging. So if you ever go for a scan, MRI scan, that's what the PACS does. And then there's a radiology information system, and that's the end-to-end management of the radiology workflow. So it's like the administration system. So it does your appointments and it gets all the diagnostics back. So that's the element to that. And then there's another product there called Patient Dose. And that system is a management system that monitors and evaluates that when people have radiology. So that evaluates that element of it. And this program is combining both the PACS and the RIS at the same time. So we went live with both at the same time. Now, again, this is a first for NHS Wales. Normally, we replace the PACS and then we replace the RIS. But the intention initially on this was that there would be a fully integrated PACS and radiology information system. That they don't exist, unfortunately. So we've had two products on this, but again, this is the first for Wales that we've done both at the same time, and that again has been quite a challenge for all involved. So again, just a picture of what RISP is, just to help people, as we noted. So you'll have a scan, and it will go back into the system, and the RISP system will do appointment scheduling. It saves your images so people can look at them. So it is this end-to-end solution to enable people to have their scans, have their diagnosis, and then whatever the treatment is, be it radiotherapy, then the system manages that element of it as well. So in terms of the RISP program, so it did start quite a while ago in June 2019. It was paused because of COVID, and they did do a review. When it became apparent there was no such thing as an integrated PACS and RIS solution, then the program did pause and review that and decide whether or not they did want to continue with replacing both the systems at the same time. The service took the decision that they did want to do that. Again, there's been a number of challenges in this program. mainly around the supplier and cross-border working, because the health boards obviously move work around quite a lot, and they, you know, there's tertiary centres that need to view images and see patients across multiple health board boundaries. And as we know, this was a big implementation, and it proved very much a challenge for the supplier to do an implementation at this scale. And also each health board does have its own instance of PACS and its own instance of the RIS. There's an overarching All Wales view that sits on top of the RIS, but each health board has its own RIS. So that's proved a challenge again, because that's 9 instances of a RIS system across Wales. So the suppliers struggle with that, everyone struggled with it. When we go live, we've had to deploy the interfaces to each instance, because that's how it was configured. Having said that, we are now live with Powys, BCU, Howells R, Imaging Academy, Cwmtaf, Swansea Bay, and since these were done, Velindre have gone live as well. So we've gone live with 4 organisations in a month. So as you can imagine, the teams are rather tired at the moment from that, including the supplier team as well. But it's really been motoring this last month. It's amazing what they've got through. So just to go through the implementations, as you can see, all those implementations, and Velindre went live in April. Our remaining 2 implementations are 2 big health boards, Cardiff and Vale and Anira and Bevan. So they are in June. They shifted out. As you can see, we were due to complete end of March, but due to local dependencies and the cross-border working, some of the challenges around that's why there's been some movement beyond March. So Velindre moved because of that cross-border working, and Cardiff and Vale and Anira and Bevan have moved for local dependencies and some dependencies on the supplier. The intention is that this programme closes at the end of June, because we, like I say, the funding, we're waiting to hear about the funding. We haven't heard yet, but also with the current climate, there are other programmes we need to work on following the end of June. So in terms of the governance structure, so this is different from LIMS. So it's significantly different. So the contracts, each health board has its own individual contract with the supplier. So the implementation is actually the responsibility of the supplier and the health board. We are providing the programme management wrap around this, and we provide the national interfaces. But the actual contracts and the responsibilities lie between the health board and the supplier. However, we have supported a lot, because we've been brought. It's very difficult to manage it, for the supplier to manage all those individual elements like that. So we have stepped in, and we'll go into that more a little later. In terms of the clinical support, we've got a national clinical lead in place. The Imaging Academy also provides support, and each health board does have its own clinicians in place for the go lives, because it's, you know, the element of this. And there's just a picture just showing the governance structure. In terms of the benefits, so with this, there's a number of benefits in here. Even though the systems are separate instances, they are standardized. So they are running the same system. It's basically an off-the-shelf system. So the supplier hasn't done any developments. It's obviously done integration. We need integration, and some health boards have had additional integration. But the system is a standardized system, and the supplier hasn't done specific developments for any health boards. And we're hopefully that will remain that way. So that national system is enabling more cross-border working across the health boards, viewing images and moving work around. So it's moving more to that once for Wales approach for radiology, as previously they were all separate. So the challenges, one of the key challenges, we call it global work list, and this is particularly around this transition period where organisations were on 2 separate systems. So because we started the implementations in February last year, and we won't have completed them till June this year. So where we've got organisations where one organisation is on the legacy PAC system and another organisation is on the new PAC system, that has caused a real challenge, because health boards need to see each other's imaging because of that cross-border working, because we have tertiary sites like Pwyllgor is a tertiary site, and that's proved really challenging because there is no technical solution that delivers everything that the health boards and trusts needed. It just didn't exist. Neither supplier, the legacy or the new supplier, could deliver it in the timescales or to the cost. The timescales we were quoted by the legacy supplier was 3 years and in excess of over £1 million. And even then, they weren't sure they could deliver what the service required. So it has meant we've done what we could, but that has meant there's had to be local processes in place. And that has taken a while for health boards to look at and implement. So there's been a number of the go live moves as a result of this challenge on the global work list. So yeah, that's been a real challenge. The other one that we noticed was about independent contracts. As we said, each health board has its own contract with the supplier. So they're responsible for their own implementation, their own SLAs, they're responsible for it. So even though that was the plan, in reality, it hasn't worked like that. The supplier cannot manage the individual contracts that way because it's such a big implementation. They've really struggled implementing individual and managing all the different facets of each health board. So as a result, we were requested by NHS chief execs to move to a more national model. So we're supporting the health boards a lot more, particularly in the contract management element of it. So we were brought in more to help broker the deals with the global work list, with the legacy supplier. Again, the contracts with the legacy supplier were out with health boards, so we were asked to come in more to facilitate those discussions. We had escalation meetings with the legacy supplier so we could work through this challenge on the global work list. And that goes down to, as we discussed, about the supplier management. So we have stepped in here at the request of NHS chief execs to bring that national commercial approach and managing the contract more as a once for Wales approach, because as we know, there's more power in the collective than there is in each individual health board going to the supplier themselves. So that it's been really powerful, that collective approach that we've taken with the supplier, and it really does, we think, need to be like that, because we need to share that learning across the organisations. So we've been brought in more to do that. That's something we need to think about, because come the end of June, we, DHEW, the programme team, will be moving away from this side of things. So we are going to be having discussions with the service on how they want to transition from implementation to BAU, and what additional support that they will need to help manage the supplier and take this forward. And again, just going back, the go live date changes. There have been changes to the original go live date, multiple reasons, supplier challenges, and again this global work list. So that's why we've moved beyond the end of March. But as noted, we've got 4 go lives in 1 month done, which is really amazing to get through all of those. The next steps are Pwyllgor went live on the 20th of April as planned. And we've got Cardiff and Vale on the 1st of June and an Iron Bevan on the 22nd of June. And then we will be going through the programme closure. One of the things that has been noted, though, because of, I think, the pace of the implementations that we have done, the supplier are struggling in that transition from implementation to BAU. There are a number of residual issues from those go lives, which are proving really, really challenges. Health boards are feeling the pain on this, as is the supplier. So we are going to be working with the supplier and the health boards about how we can support that and help that smoother transition from implementation to BAU, because it's in a hybrid mode at the moment. So there's a lot more work to be done. And obviously there's 2 really big go lives coming up. So we are going to be having further conversations with the supplier and health boards around how we can support that smoother transition. So as we noted, key successes. So DHW did all the data migration from the RADIS, the old RIS system, into the new RIS system called Soliton. We've delivered all the national integrations, and we've done all those go lives with those last 4 in a month. Stakeholder feedback. So this is from the Swansea Bay RIS go live. So just to say we led on the cutover planning for the health boards, and every go live, the cutover starts on a Friday night, and the teams work all the way through the weekend till they go live on a Monday morning. And there's a cutover plan that goes through all that weekend. So for the go live, like you say, there's all the readiness activity, and then there's an awful lot of activity that go live weekend, and all the teams are online. You can see the chats going, as each element goes through. That cutover plan now is like a well-oiled machine. It really works, and all the organisations and the DHW technical delivery teams completely aligned, and it runs really smoothly. And the atmosphere, you can tell, even it's in a chat, the atmosphere in the chat is really good, with what everybody understands what they need to do and when they need to do it by. And we have been thrown some curveballs. There have been curveballs in there. Some issues have happened with the health board cutover, some issues have happened with the supplier, but because we have that plan, the team are able to adapt and readjust. So we've had to move some timelines in at the weekend. If something was due to finish at 2 o'clock, it now doesn't finish till 4. It just slots in, and that cutover planning has enabled the teams to adapt when something happens, because these are complex go lives. There's so many different systems at play, so you have to be able to adapt and react to things that come out of left field that you're not expecting. So it is working. I'm really proud of all the teams because it's worked so well. And that's the end of the RIS presentation.
Excellent. Thank you for that update, Alison. There's an awful lot of work been done, and there's a last big push to get the last couple of big implementations done, but it's looking good. Can I check, see if colleagues have got any questions for Alison on RISP? I can't see any questions, Alison, so can I thank you very much for that update. Good luck with the remaining couple of big implementations, and the next update we'll get at the next PDC meeting will likely be the closure report that you've spoken about. So many thanks for the good work you've done up to now, and good luck with the remaining couple of implementations. Okay, so I'll draw this section of the agenda to a close. We've been asked to note the 3 programme updates for assurance. We're now going to take a short break. Can I ask colleagues to come back in 7 minutes at 11:20, and we'll restart. And during the break, if you would mute your microphone and turn off your camera, please, and I'll see everyone at 11:20. Thanks. Okay, everyone, thanks for rejoining. Let's proceed with item 5.1 on the agenda, which is the escalation status update. And for this, I'm going to hand over to Chris Darling.
Thank you, David. Yeah, so just to recap the current position from a DHW perspective, in March 2025, DHW was escalated, which was a change from level 1 routine monitoring to level 3 enhanced monitoring, and that related specifically to the delivery of major programmes under the performance and outcomes domain of the NHS Wales escalation intervention framework. When that happened, the board delegated responsibility for oversight of the enhanced monitoring improvement plan to this committee of the board, and the frequency of these meetings increased from 3 monthly to 6 weekly, and that's been the case now for just over a year. On the 8th of April this year, so a couple of weeks ago, Welsh Government confirmed DHW's escalation status had increased to level 4 targeted interventions. So I'm just going to run through some of the activity related to escalation over the past month or two. Firstly, just to note, there's been no integrated performance, quality and delivery meeting since the last committee meeting, so there's no updates from that perspective. There is a DDAT delivery board meeting scheduled for the 13th of May, which will consider at a system-wide level some of the programmes that are within the scope of our escalation status. In terms of the escalation arrangements, Welsh Government have confirmed that new arrangements will be in place from the 1st of April this year for all NHS bodies. So rather than those integrated performance, quality and delivery meetings, there'll be escalation boards that meet. And the frequency of those is based on the level of escalation. So we'll have bi-monthly meetings, escalation boards, the first one being planned for June. Ivan mentioned the pause and review, but I guess worth just noting that pause and review does relate to major programmes within the scope of escalation. I did just want to pause on the enhanced monitoring improvement plan that I referenced earlier. So that ran from May 2025 to the end of March 2026 that this committee oversaw. There were 47 milestones within that plan, relating to areas within the escalation framework, so major programme delivery and stakeholder relations. Of the 47 milestones, 45 have been delivered, so that's 96 of the 96%, sorry, of the plan. Of the 45 milestones have been delivered. Of the 45 milestones delivered, 40 were delivered to time. So that's 85% of the plan. 5 milestones during the course of that period missed their original target dates, but have now been delivered or were delivered before the end of March 2026. The 2 milestones that haven't been delivered, we've just heard about actually. It was the go live for LIMS and RISP. And I think Alison just gave a full briefing and update on those. So I won't pause on those, but just to note, those were the 2 milestones that we weren't able to achieve during the plan. I think there's been significant learning over the course of the last 10 months during that plan rollout. I think programme delivery, learning, stakeholder relations and collaborative working. We've developed a programme typology and commercial approach as a result. Benefit articulation and realization, and delivering through mandate versus collaboration, as well as program governance and other learnings that we've taken during the course of the last 10 months or so. So I did just want to say thank you to all the program staff who have been involved in the improvement plan and provided updates, etc., over the course of the last 10 months in delivering this. Unfortunately, from a DHW perspective, the plan hasn't led to the improvements that Welsh Government had hoped for, and the feedback I think reflects that they felt the plan was too transactional. So we did work, as the committee knows, on a phase 2 escalation plan. At present, I don't think that plan has any current status, in that we are waiting, given the announcement 2 weeks ago, for a revised escalation framework. When we receive that, we will work with Welsh Government and the Performance and Improvement Unit to develop a plan to take forward and address the areas they want addressed through that process. So it'll be a 2-phased approach, is how it's been described: a diagnostic, and then once the diagnostic is done, some detailed work to address areas of concern. So the update, David, is more around reflection on the plan over the last 12 months, and just to make committee members aware, there will be more information that comes over the, I would have thought, coming weeks and months around a new approach, and obviously we'll keep the committee up to date and the board cited on how that progresses.
Okay, thanks, Chris, for that update. I've got a question, but I'll just pause, see if anybody else has got anything I want to ask Chris. No, I'm wondering, Chris, if we, in terms of reworking the phase 2 plan that we did go through I think at our development session, what have you got a view? I know it's a fast-moving situation, but have you got a view of how long it'll take before we've got something that we as a committee can oversee in terms of trying to get some assurance that we're moving in the right direction in terms of getting out of escalation?
Yeah, so the phase 2 plan, although I say it's got no formal status, I think that's from a Welsh Government perspective. We've submitted to them following the last programmes delivery committee. We haven't had formal feedback on it.
Yeah.
And I have raised that with Welsh Government colleagues, mainly to get clarification on what status, if any, it does have. But we are reviewing that, David. I guess we're not tracking it here formally because, as I say, we don't know the status, but internally we are looking at it. And it does address things that we need to address as an organisation anyway, as the discussions in terms of putting it together were progressed. They're priority areas, so they will continue. And they still relate to the areas within the escalation framework as it is now. My only nervousness is if that escalation framework changes, there might be things currently in that plan that need to expand or aren't in the scope of the revised escalation framework.
Okay, fine. Thank you for that. Ruth.
Thanks, Chris. Thanks, David. I think you partly covered it there, Chris. There are a number of things in that escalation plan that I would expect us to be doing anyway, particularly when it comes to driving value out of the products that we've created or we manage. So I wouldn't expect us to be sat around waiting to do things on those elements of the escalation plan for a formal agreement to happen, because whatever the next phase of escalation plan looks like, I would expect those things to be in there. And it might be that some things need to expand and there might be other things added into there. And I'm really keen to get on with the diagnostics piece of work. But I think, part of our input to that diagnostic piece of work is the work that we did on that second phase escalation plan, because I think we really did, look at what would be needed to properly drive the change and be less transactional, think about the value from our products and how we can demonstrate that. And some of the examples, for the NDR and those case studies, there is no excuse for us to not be starting work on those now. We don't need to wait for an escalation plan to do that. We need to be working on that stuff as we speak, essentially.
Yeah, absolutely, Ruth. So the work is happening. I guess it's just the status of it, but you're absolutely right. And just to say, the work we did as a committee through that development session whittled down that plan, didn't it, from about 50 areas of learning from a 9-10 month period on escalation to about 20 of the most important things we felt really needed to progress. So that's what the plan represents.
Okay, great. Thank you, Chris. Marion.
Thank you, Chris, and thank you for that very clear update. I was just wondering, there appears to be little feedback to date to clarify, sort of the next steps. I wonder whether we are an outlier here within NHS Wales, and what do we understand in terms of the wider system, and are they also facing similar challenges as ours?
Thanks, Marion. I think there is a lot of learning and similar challenges, particularly relating to health boards. So I think I'm right in saying all of the 7 health boards are in escalated status of some form at the moment. And Welsh Government colleagues have shared that what they've described as a 2-phase approach being taken to DHEW is the approach being taken with one of the other health boards. So they've shared how that's looked informally, which has been helpful just to understand how it's likely to look for us as well. I think the other thing just to mention, clearly with the change in approach in terms of the escalation and intervention arrangements for all NHS bodies, so they have changed escalation and the approach generally across the board from this April. So we're in new ground in that sense. The escalation board, some have happened with health board colleagues. That obviously they haven't happened for us yet. That's planned for June, the first meeting, but we will get some learning from how these are going. And the role of PNI in terms of providing intervention, I think that's been enhanced over the last 6 months and continues to be enhanced. So that's a slight change as well. So there is learning, Marion, and I am keeping in touch with colleagues from other NHS bodies to help understand what they've learned and what might help us.
Thank you. I think that's really important and potential for a lot of support for us as well. So diolch.
Okay, thank you for that update, Chris. Let's move on to the next item on our agenda, which is the major programmes update report. I'll hand over to Evan, who's going to provide an overview, and then we'll dip into each of the programmes that are on our agenda.
Thank you very much, David. So I'll do two things. One is just to refresh the structure of the report and just remind everybody of what's in the report. And then secondly, I'm going to try to give a sort of an executive delivery confidence summary, and I'll come back to why I'm using that particular phrase in a second. And I'm very grateful to my colleague Sam Lloyd for his support on preparing for that. The report, which is in front of you, is the usual cover paper, and then there's a PowerPoint PDF slide deck. In the slide deck, there's a graphical representation of the overall health of the portfolio using our red, amber, green, and grey delivery confidence, and then we look through the new scoring of any new projects. There's one in that space, which is the co-pilot enablement project linked to the work we've been doing with Microsoft, the enterprise architecture renewal, the Microsoft 365 Centre of Excellence, and our appetite to use AI where that is sensible, which I'll come back to. The scoring does not make it a major program. It becomes one of our, if you like, sort of, we don't actually have a term for non-major programs, but it's a non-major program. But we've been through that process and discipline. And secondly, we look at life cycle moves as programs establish, run, and then move through their closure phases. The key one, and it is a big one here, is to note the move to program closure of the DSPP, Digital Services for Public and Patients program. It's been a really important flagship program for us for several years. That has now transitioned to business as usual, or to a product-based approach. Sam Hall and I, and also Sam Lloyd, because there's been a strong operational input from the shift to product approach we've done under Building Our Future and others, worked closely over the last 6 months to ensure that has been a smooth transition. That has landed since the beginning of April with Sam working through a changed operating model from the program. So the report is there to note here. I'll just take the opportunity to thank the program team for the work that they've done through that process, not just in building that product from scratch and getting it up to around about 750,000 users, but also the close working over the last 6 months, to build our in-house capacity and also to transition across. So maybe Sam will say something more about that when she gives her update on the individual programs later. We have in the slide deck 3 escalations to note, again in the usual way. The escalations are the LIMS system, the RISP system, and the WICIS system. By coincidence, those are the 3 that have been for the assurance report earlier on. There is a commercial aspect to the WICIS escalation, so we'll be discussing that in our private board meeting later on. I won't dwell on the escalations there in the pack, and we've already had the assurance update from Alison, an opportunity to discuss. If there's anything further, then perhaps we can bring that in afterwards. And then we go through the final 2 parts of that report. So the first is an overview of each of the major programs. So all those programs that are classed as major, they get in the report. So this is our routine approach. There's a RAGS delivery confidence assessment, a summary narrative of a few hundred words, the achievements in the last period since the PDC last met, and there's a route to green, which is always there if they're amber, red, or red in terms of confidence, but is sometimes there if we think that there's some other work to do on amber, green as well. This is relatively more detailed there, and then we go through each of them later on after I've handed back to yourself, David. And then for other programs, non-major programs, we've got a lighter exception-based reporting. So they get the RAG rating, and then if they are amber, red, or red in any regard, then there's a further commentary and an opportunity to escalate and to have a more in-depth review here at the PDC. But we can't do that for all programs because we've got a limited bandwidth. So hopefully that I'll just pause in case there are any questions on that, and then I'll try and give the delivery confidence summary. I know I'm building it up, but
okay, I think we're all waiting with in anticipation.
So so I probably oversold it now. delivery confidence is a matter of judgment and about how we describe things. We are very conscious of the perceptions of our stakeholders. We work very hard on stakeholder engagement. We're conscious of the perception of Welsh Government, the conversations that we're having them with government about our escalation status, and a lot of those conversations. The level 3 escalation was about major programs delivery confidence in itself. And one of the things that we're trying to do across the organization is to use AI more. And in particular, from my perspective, it's different in the software engineering and coding environment. But in the strategy executive space, I'm using AI and Copilot to get let's call it a middle neutral view. That is what AI is good at doing. So it will digest your text, it will base it on all the text that is consumed everywhere. And if you imagine a bell curve, the AI will almost always land up right in the middle of the bell curve. And using that as a kind of reference point in order to, as much as we sensibly can, to strip out subjective judgments. And as you know, I'm very, very proud of the program and project teams, and that can sometimes veer into being defensive. So use AI to tailor that and to try to get a sort of a neutral, objective, independent view. It's a lot cheaper than using consultants to do that, and a lot quicker as well. So what I'm going to play back is a Copilot view of the question, the prompt, and I'm grateful to Sam. Sam leads the M365 and the Copilot, so we're working together on this. The question is, what's the Copilot view of the overall delivery confidence based on the major programs report, the cover paper, and the documents that are in front of us, PDC, today? So the overall picture is qualified confidence rather than systemic delivery failure or uncontrolled delay, and I think that I'm comfortable with that. That seems to make sense. There's good and bad. There's evidence of progress across lots of programs, but that's uneven and fragile in certain areas, and we know that there are some really important programs that are facing some significant challenges. Overall, the view is that there is delivery capability. It is active, but there are also constraints, and I'll just go through those quickly as a kind of an overview of where the whole portfolio is in terms of its health, workforce capacity, dependency on some specialist skills, and particularly the burden of legacy systems. And that came through very prominently in Alison's update on LIMS earlier on, rather than weak program management or lack of effort. I know that teams are working really, really hard, and yes, we've got areas of improvement. Yes, we want continuous learning, and we want to build our capability. But I am assured that our teams are doing the very best that they can in the circumstances that we have. So across the portfolio, there are broadly 3 tranches. There are programs that have got a strong or an improving confidence with consistent delivery momentum as reported through the documents that are coming through. So GP systems migration is probably the most obvious because that's been green pretty much through its whole life, and is moving on timetable, in fact accelerated timetable within the next month or so, I think. EPS, EPMA, again, is really comforting, I guess, to see, and reassuring to see those called out. They've been excluded from the DPIF review, and we know that they are delivering. EPS particularly is going to complete 10 months ahead of its original schedule and at a significantly reduced budget compared to its original plan. Target architecture and the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Agreement renewal, which we considered at an extraordinary board meeting not so long ago. So that seems to me to be, bang on the money, and the sort of Copilot view is that collectively they reinforce a baseline confidence in ability to deliver programs, because there are several programs that are going solidly. There's a second group of programs that are under pressure. So their delivery is progressing, but they're under pressure. They're facing certain challenges, and in that group, Cloud Transition Program, the NDR, RISP, and Connecting Care. So they're making progress, but there are tight constraints which are identified. Delivery is not stalled, but pace and confidence sometimes comes under a bit of challenge, and in many cases, it's external dependencies that are driving those funding decisions, supplier timelines and capability, our workforce capacity in our own organisation and across the wider NHS. And interestingly, the final comment on this is teams are managing risk, often prioritising stability over acceleration. I think, well, yeah, actually, good point. We are constantly facing that challenge. The health and care context needs stability. It is a safety-conscious environment, and we understand everybody's desire to accelerate things very quickly, but there's a limit to the extent to which we can do that without compromising patient safety, potential harm, and other risk. And we deal with that by discussing our risk appetite as a whole organization in different areas. And then finally, we've got some programs that are driving lower overall confidence. In this bracket are LIMS. And because it's recently shifted into an Amber Red space, the integration hub, because that's so crucial to the central sort of management of our entire architecture and systems. And it's quite interesting actually to just pull that out. And I think it's identified that there's a real significant dependency out into other programs as we try to transition off our existing integrations architecture to our new integrations architecture, and we got to land that, otherwise there'll be a ripple effect across various other things. So I think there's a lot of very useful insight in there, and it phrases it quite nicely. I'll finish in a second. So there are 4 cross-cutting themes that are identified lifting out of this. The first is funding uncertainty as a primary constraint. We discussed this right at the beginning, and what that conveys to me is it's already starting to come through the reports, and in the next cycle of reports we'll have a more structured, more consistent, and probably much more evident approach to how we're managing that funding constraint, and unless the review completes slightly quicker than anticipated, in which case we'll be back onto the level quite quickly. Workforce capacity, specialist skills, testing is a really key constraint for us in lots of different places. There are limiting factors, internal and external to DHCW, that we are continually struggling with in terms of delivery pace, particularly given other competing pressures. Legacy systems and the complexity of our architecture, that's what the NTA program is intended to address. Legacy systems, technical debt, see that coming through very clearly in LIMS and RISP to some degree in the updates that we had earlier. And then finally, and this is co-pilot, this is a neutral view, but this is also our portfolio delivery committee, our board assurance mechanism, a strong assurance maturity. So a notable positive across the portfolio is the maturity of assurance. And what it draws out particularly is that the risks are clearly articulated in the risk register that Chris will present on later, and that there's a clear route to recovery and mitigation when we are Amber Red, and there's a high degree of transparency about this, where we're putting as much as we can out in the reports for all our stakeholders to see. So I think that was very welcome. So the summary then is taken as a whole, the portfolio is not in systemic distress, but it's not operating with comfortable headroom either. It's tight, and that sort of resonates, I suppose, with me. And confidence is in some areas fragile and is uneven across the portfolio, especially where there's a funding constraint, there's a constraint on specialist capacity, or the legacy factors that we're dealing with are impacting on the critical path because we keep exposing unexpected challenges through testing, through stakeholder engagement, and through other things. So I thought that was really, for me, that was very, very helpful, because it's almost like I've paid somebody for a few days to come in and have a look at this and to go through the whole document, and basically is a prompt from Copilot that Sam shared with me, which has been really helpful. And there's not much that I would want to add to that. I think I'd probably want to bring a little bit of the people color to it. I know that our teams are working really, really, really hard, and it is that effort, together with the uncertainty that is going on for a whole host of reasons, new government, DPIF review, escalation status, a recruitment freeze, which we've mentioned, or a recruitment pause that we've mentioned, it is causing some pressure on teams and on people, and we're watching really, really carefully to make sure that people are not burning out or toppling over, because we cannot achieve anything without people, and it's one of our main sort of strategic priorities to put people first. And the AI maybe didn't put that through as prominently as I would, but why would it? Yeah. It's an AI. So I hope that was helpful and interesting. Welcome some comments and discussions, and then I'll hand back to you, David, to take us through the individual programs.
Okay, thanks for that. That was a useful bit of context around what we're looking at. So let's go to Sam Hall first for an update on GP Systems Framework. Over to you, Sam.
Thanks, Chair. So this is actually quite a brief update on GP Systems Framework. As you know, we've been transitioning away from the 2 systems that were in place following the one going into administration, and we're now moving solely to Optum across Wales. That was moving around 200 GP practices. We are due to complete this at the end of May. And we have 12 left as of today to transition. So on track to complete. It has been an epic piece of work from the teams. Stepping up the transition from 1 to 2 was challenging enough. From 2 to 4 has been huge. And in famous words, they said it couldn't be done, but it has been. So I'd just like to thank Donna Charlie and her leadership on the ground for this. Donna leads the teams that are out every day with GP practices, working with our Optum colleagues and our health board colleagues and our practice colleagues to make this happen. And that without Donna as the lieutenant in this, it would have been a real pickle to try and manage.
Okay, thank you for that, Sam. Ruth?
Thanks, Sam. Yeah, I mean, I think I would agree. It's been a legendary effort. So diolch yn fawr for that. Ivan's replacement has just told us that we value stability over acceleration in some cases. Well, here's an example of where we have continued with stability, but we have also accelerated. How have you balanced those competing challenges on this?
I think I showed you a diagram a while back now of all of the things that you need to plug into a GP system to make it work, and it is massive. It's a massive amount of behind the scenes work just to make it function. And so for us, it was been actually to echo a little bit of what Alison said, the upfront technical work, the preparation beforehand, before any boots go on the ground, that preparation, that data check-in, the QAing of data that needs to come out of the system, go into the system, all of that, the stuff that could be done upfront, was the bit that we accelerated the most. So that what we didn't do is put pressure on the amount of time we spent in the practices. So we tried to keep that at a minimum. The other thing was to spread the pain. So unlike a lot of programs where you're working health board by health board at a time, and you're going through that health board and you're putting all of the pressure into that one health board, because that's how quite often the big secondary care systems have to work. What we were able to do in the primary care space was to share the pain across health boards. So we didn't take a lot of practices out in any one health board at any one time. You know, we would do one in Hildar at the same time we were doing 2 in Betsy, for instance. So it's moving that around, and it was just as much up front and behind the scenes preparation where the teams could take the pressure off to do that. That said, would we really want to do that again? Probably not. Or not for an extended period of time. I said we accelerated once we'd really got into a good cadence of doing it. We knew what we were doing. We were rinse and repeat, and then we started to accelerate. And you know, we couldn't do that actually. One of the things that was a limited factor at the beginning was the capacity of our supplier. Just the size of the task of moving it, we needed to wait for them to make their systems big enough for us to be able to move into. So there were a lot of things, but yeah, I would say that the upfront preparation, the making sure that we weren't putting too much pressure on any one part of the system, has helped us to keep friends with people, which has also made it really helpful for us, keep everyone on board all the way through.
Thanks, Sam. I think the lesson here is for some of those other programs where we're taking a more risk-averse approach, that acceleration is possible if you put the right work into it. So I think that's the lessons learned here for me on that point. Diolch.
Okay, Marion.
Yeah, and I'm sure these are transferable lessons, aren't they, as you say, Ruth? I was just interested in terms of user feedback, Sam. What's the feedback been like generally, as this programme is completed, the migration is fully in place?
it's been overwhelmingly positive. It's something that the team really like to share, and that's that's not just feedback where people have written in to tell us how well that's been managed. There's just been some brilliant feedback from the teams themselves, whether that's the practice teams or my teams coming back in and saying that experience was, God, that was tough. That was a good few days where it was rocky, but everyone pulling together. So I don't think we often necessarily hear or act upon the feedback so much from the teams actually in the thick of things when they come back and they say it was hard, but we got there. And that's been really really good to hear. But invariably, I think I don't have the numbers to hand, they might be in the pack, but it's it's well over 90, I think it's over 95% positive feedback on our engagement with the practices. So yeah, it's been a it's been a thing, but it has gone as well as we hoped. And I don't like saying that it is the last few hurdles now, the last 12. Anything can go wrong, but we are really confident that we've nailed this now. And at the end of May, we can say that's done. And then of course we motor on EPS, which is the next big thing, and this allows us to really motor on that and to bring that in significantly earlier than we had planned. So that is again big win, but it'll be the same teams with the same relationships they built up doing that work.
Great, thank you.
Thank you, Sam. And please pass on the thanks of this committee to the team for a job well done. Even.
Yeah, I think just to add, I think the repeatability. So coming to Ruth's point about how have we managed to combine stability and acceleration, I think repeatability has been key, as well as really detailed planning with iterative refinement in the early stages of that repeatability. If you do the same thing over and over again, then you can speed up more safely. And in some regards, compared to some of our other programs, the supplier and the stakeholder and the funding context actually have been more one-dimensional. I'm choosing my words carefully here, I guess, but in several programs, there are very complex funding, contractual and stakeholder environments. And I'm not saying for a moment that the GP community is not complex in its own way, but it's a different type of complexity, which I think Sam and the team have been able to manage more tightly than in certain areas we've been able to manage in other programs.
Okay, thanks, Stephen. Let's move on to Sam Lloyd and the Microsoft 365 Enterprise Agreement.
Thank you, David. So there's a single All Wales Enterprise Agreement for the procurement of Microsoft 365 services. So these are the tools that we all use day in, day out. So things like Teams and SharePoint and OneDrive and Outlook and so on. It's also a set of sort of infrastructure type capabilities, so remote access and device management and so on. There's also quite a large chunk of security capability, antivirus and things which all form part of the package of M365 tools. Some time ago, we put an All Wales contract in place with Microsoft. That is due to, we're currently in the 4th year of a 5-year enterprise agreement, which comes to an end on the 30th of June of this year, that 4th year does. So we had a decision point. Do we want to extend into year 5, or do we want to procure a new enterprise agreement and secure some price certainty over a longer period of time? So a project was established to take forward one of those courses of action, and we decided that the new enterprise agreement was the appropriate way to do that, particularly given some of the digital inflationary challenges and so on that we face as a system. So we felt it was really important to get long-term price stability and security. So to keep it brief, we've been through a long period of negotiation with Microsoft. We've come together really effectively as a system on this, I think. So we've had a project board which has had wide representation from across the system. We've also had a task and finish group which works to that project board, which has representation from every organisation in Wales. Through that mechanism, we've pulled together a comprehensive set of requirements and understanding of licensing needs. We fed those into a series of contract negotiations with Microsoft. We have secured a really good contract outcome for the system, which has avoided a very significant cost increase, which was as opposed to the original pricing that we received when we first started getting formal costs back around about the end of last calendar year. So we have taken that agreement through the project board, and each organisation has passed it through their own board governance to sign off, and DHCW signed that off at an extraordinary board meeting on the 16th of April. So we've got a way forward which has been agreed by every organisation in Wales, and we're just about to sign the contract with Microsoft. We're just in the final kind of pre-signature discussions at the moment, but really it's in the bag, and I think it's a really good outcome for us as a system. I'd like to thank everybody who's taken part in it, because if we hadn't come together in the way that we did, we wouldn't have got the outcome that we have. So I think it's a really good example of how an all Wales activity can really bring benefits. So I think this will probably be the last update, because the programme will close once we've got the contract signed. We might do a lessons learned, or I'm sure we will do a lessons learned, which we'll bring back, but this will be the last formal report. Thank you.
Okay. Thanks, Sam. Any questions for Sam on this? No, we did cover this at the extraordinary board meeting, so well done to you and the team for getting that over the line. Sam, perhaps we could move on to cloud transition next, please.
Thank you. So the cloud transition programme is the means by which we will move the vast majority of our services from hosting in on-premise data centres, which DHCW owns, but we don't own, we rent and operate, to commercial cloud providers, largely hyperscale suppliers, the ones that you would imagine. The reason for doing that is really twofold. We need to avoid the increase in cost that we will face if we continue to stay in data centers, and that comes through energy price increases, it comes through hardware replacements. It also we'll start incurring, I guess, green issues over the longer term, because it's much more carbon efficient and energy efficient to run in hyperscale environments than it is in locally provisioned data centers, despite our best efforts. So there's a number of reasons why this is the right course of action for us as an organisation. We have an approved business case which is well underway. We're currently rating the programme as an amber green confidence, although the DPIF pause and review that we've discussed will impact that rating going forward, and I'll touch on that in a bit more detail later. The programme has established 3 work streams. So we have an infrastructure delivery work stream, which is really looking at readiness. So that's putting the right connectivity in place. That's building the right landing zones with the cloud providers. That's making sure we've got the right security profile across all of that. We've got a migration and optimization work stream, which is actually moving services from one place to another and optimizing them as far as we can to run efficiently in the cloud. And then there's an organizational change work stream, which is building the internal capability that we need in order to manage those services effectively. And I think essentially to ensure that we can use the cloud capabilities to their full extent, which means using them really to accelerate the delivery of products to our customers and stakeholders. So we now have suppliers and partners in place across all 3 of those work streams. We've got a lot of the foundation work done, so the Azure platform build is completed. We've established network connectivity into Azure. We've got our security designs approved. We've brought our migration support partner in place. So this was a contract that was recently awarded, and that's gone to KPMG and Atos. So pleased that we've got some global partners working with us on that important part of the work. And we've had our architecture designs reviewed by Microsoft and Google, which is gives us a solid foundation to move forward. Part of the organizational change work stream was to update the cloud strategy, which we've now done, and we're taking that through our internal strategy improvement process. And we've got the training and operating model work well underway. Some of the main challenges that we are up against is that we've had to re-baseline some of the infrastructure delivery timescales because of platform issues in Azure. And it also took longer than expected to get the network connectivity implemented, but that is now in place and should enable us to move forward. The recruitment situation has obviously slowed the ability for us to bring in some of the external resources that we need, which were due to start at the beginning of this financial year. And we've got some capacity issues in the cyber team, which have held up to some extent as well, which we're now working through to address as well. The major problem that we have is really around funding uncertainty. The DPIF pause and review is obviously impacting this programme as it is all others. And what the major problem that we have is that although we have contractual arrangements in place, we're awarding work on a per work package basis, which means that activities are getting, we're not able to proceed in some areas. The major risk that we have is that not doing this work will have longer term financial consequences, because data center costs will continue to rise. Some of the hardware replacement schedules will start to come into force, which means that we may have to start procuring hardware to replace things as they become obsolete. And also we've got some software renewals, such as the Citrix situation, which will also start to bite around about the end of this calendar year or slightly before. So we will start to incur costs if this program is delayed, which is obviously an issue for us.
Okay, thank you, Sam. Anybody got any questions for Sam on cloud transition? I've just got the one, Sam. So in terms of the potential risk for these costs that we were planning to avoid, but the delay might, have we clearly communicated that back to Welsh Government through the response to the DPIF pause and review process?
Yes, we have. So we've indicated that there will be cost impacts to not proceeding with this work, according to the schedule that we were initially planning. We're also trying to understand whether there are, so I guess this is an organizational consideration, but are we so do the risks of delaying outweigh the risks of proceeding with some of this work at our own internal financial risks? So that's the consideration that we're making. We have the potential opportunity to repurpose some discretionary funds at risk, which is the conversation that we're now having.
Fine. Okay, thank you. If there's no more questions for Sam, thank you for that, Sam. Let's go to Evan. And in conscious, you've got a hard stop for a train. So do you want to do 4 of your updates rather than flip between? You've got digital medicines first, electronic prescribing, and then national target architecture and NDR. Do you want to do all those together?
Well, yeah, so I'm taking the N's and Michelle's taking the E's. So I've got National Target Architecture, National Data Resource, and then Michelle will lead on EPS and EPMA. So if you're happy for me to go first on those, I'll do those, as long as everyone's happy to just bounce around the slide deck a little bit. National Target Architecture was a piece of work, as members will recall, that it was a project commissioned by Welsh Government from DHCW on behalf of NHS Wales to develop our architectural capability across the system, to transition all organisations or support all organisations to use the same system-wide enterprise architecture mapping tool, a product called RDoC, to undertake a current state assessment to map what we currently have in terms of systems, and to draft a design for a future target state which would tackle or address a lot of the fragmentation, technical debt, duplication, variation across the system, and then at the end of that 12-month cycle to develop a strategic investment plan that was aligned to the transition from the current state to the target state, but also informed by contractual cycles, necessary replacements, and a whole bunch of other things. The project has met all of its deadlines and its milestones for deliverables. It has submitted the strategic investment plan, which was the last part, to Welsh Government. There's still some work to do on that. That is more detailed on the national enabling infrastructure and architecture elements, what the plan calls national foundations, than it is on local foundations, which would be the device estate, the Wi-Fi estate, the networks that are managed by health boards in their own organizations, and the applications layer, which is the very mixed environment of over 1,000 different applications that are used and managed across the system. The majority of those, by far, are managed, contracted, and sourced locally. We struggled, as a system, we struggled to get the detailed evidence about contractual phasing, contractual life cycles, future investment plans over the next 3 to 5 years from health boards. So we're continuing to work on that. We're working very closely with Welsh Government on all of that. There's a plan, but government are content that we have met the milestone to deliver a strategic investment plan that informs the next cycle. It's a kind of a framework for the business cases that would be needed. It's not itself a business case. And there is a clear project plan that's been endorsed by all the stakeholders and partners for 26-27, but that is currently on pause because the funding is on pause, and therefore we're not proceeding with the recruitment elements or with the outsourced supplier elements of any of that plan for the time being until we can restart. So we took that decision at the last project board, which government attend regularly, and it's really helpful actually to have government attending there and having a very close connection with the policy lead on this in the policy team. So that's where we are on target architecture.
Okay.
And then
any questions? If you want to move on to NDR.
National data resource. National data resource is moving. So some key changes in that. Some key achievements first. We are seeing more and more operational data flows, live operational data flows coming through the NDR. Cardiff and Vale appointments in January of 2026. So during this sort of review period that we have here for PDC, there's reporting for maternity. So health boards have largely gone live, the initial go live with their maternity systems in March and April, and that data we are now able to present back in the National Data Analytics Programme. There's some work around enterprise GitHub, which is part of our shift towards coding. That's been opened up right across the enterprise in order to support an agile, continuous CI/CD type DevOps approach. We've run several sessions. One of them, a fantastic session, which I missed unfortunately, but everybody tells me it was great, with over 150 software engineers in the room. A really good vibe going on in there, and I'm really sorry to have missed that. But that's really encouraging to see the enthusiasm with which our teams are embracing that. There's been so that I think is a really important and very encouraging thing to see for the NDR. We've also got a new chair appointed by Welsh Government. For a long period of time, I was holding an interim chair position on NDR. We've reverted to standard governance now. Ian Bell, the Digital Director for Public Health Wales, is in the chair. He's on his second or third meeting now, and Ian is bringing quite a national posture to this. Public Health Wales, population health management, a strong desire to see the full national picture for that sort of activity, and I think our emphasis is on working with Ian and working with the Welsh Government to accelerate the migration and flow of health board data sets into the NDR and the CDR. And then finally, internally, there's been quite a lot of work which has not come out into the open yet, but very close working between operational teams for our existing national data stores and the NDR to handle the migration plan and to ensure that those are synced. Sam and I co-chaired a meeting probably about 2 weeks ago where the two teams were playing their roadmaps alongside each other so that we could assure ourselves that there was a really strong alignment. There was an understanding there of sequencing dependencies, a clear understanding of the steps that we're going to go through and who is doing what. The only note of caution at the moment around the NDR is the uncertainty around funding and onward disbursement. Around about a quarter of the NDR money goes on to our external partners. They employ staff mostly. They have to take their own risk decisions, and we really don't want to lose those people. So hopefully the delivery partners will take a decision to carry that risk until we've got clarity on funding, as we are doing. And secondly, the recruitment pause, we have what financial teams might call timing differences. So we were just about to muscle up on the data engineering team, which is structured as agile platform teams, and that would be going on right now, but that's been paused. So we're significantly under strength at the moment on the core CDR engineering team. We're doing a little bit of sort of mutual aid, mutual support across the wider data engineering community, moving work around where we can absorb that the best we can. But as at the moment, we're in a position where we can't recruit, and neither can we bring in external suppliers to support us to do that type of work either on an outsourced basis because of the funding uncertainty. So I don't think that has bitten hard yet. But if another 3 months go by, then that is going to have a really material and visible impact on a lot of key deliverables that we have in the IMTP and in our program plan for this year. So we're keeping a very, very close eye on that.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you for that, Evan. Any questions on NDR? No, okay, thank you for that, Evan. Let's go now to digital medicines then, and you hand it over to Michelle.
Yep, thank you, David. So we've got two main programs in the medicines space. So I want to start with EPMA, so Electronic Prescribing Medicines Administration. So this is basically a system that we use to manage medicines largely in our hospital environment. So this is how clinicians prescribe medications, that then messages to the pharmacies within the hospitals, medicines are dispensed. And then when medicines are given, so people who've been in hospital will know that you're given your medication, perhaps on a ward, then that is also documented in the system. So we've got a record then of any medications that you are receiving. And that's a key part of this program, is what we call the shared medicines record. So that information is then stored centrally with other aspects or other areas where you may be receiving medications to create an overall record. So that's quite key. This is a program that's running across the whole of Wales. But health boards are entering into their own contracts. So a framework contract was awarded, and health boards have each and trusts have each selected one of 3 suppliers, and all 3 suppliers have been selected. So they're all being deployed in different places across Wales, and they're at various stages in terms of their deployment. And I think it'd be fair to say organisations have taken different approaches in terms of what works, I guess, in their local areas. So a couple of recent pieces of work. I think the most recent health board to go live was Cwmtaf Morgannwg. So they went live just towards the end of March, and we would have supported them, particularly with the integration work there with their supplier. And that went live successfully. They are currently piloting in an early adopter ward, and they will scale out from there. You can see, I think it's probably fair, it's not a competition, but BCU, I think, have probably made the most progress. So they've actually got quite a lot of their health board now actually being able to use the system. And this has quite significant benefits to clinicians and to efficiency in the way that they can operate across the whole. I think the next to go then are Powys. So Powys are due to go live next Tuesday. So the key thing I probably wanted to call out on the EPMA, and we may have touched on it earlier, is Welsh Government have asked us to take a slightly different approach on EPMA. So to date, we have supported a national programme board, and we have a kind of community of knowledge and action. I think I was trying to think COCA. So like a community of practice actually that's been established by the national team here. Which has been a forum where health boards have got together and really helpfully shared kind of learning and what's happening in terms of the various implementations. Welsh Government have asked that we step up our role moving forward now, and then we actually have more of a kind of coordination direction role, and linked to that the funding, and these are quite significant levels of funding, will be channeled through DHCW to the health boards. So we've had an initial board meeting. Hopefully Welsh Government colleagues were also involved in that conversation with the health boards. And we've talked about how we will move to that way of working, starting with really, I think, us as an organisation getting a real understanding of where the health boards are and what their detailed plans are. So Welsh Government have also indicated they would like the health boards to aim for the end of March, so March 2027, to complete these implementations. I think it would be fair to say that's quite ambitious, depending on where some of them are in terms of progress. But that's really for the local organisations, I think, to take a view. So we've asked that they share those detailed plans. We are then liaising with Welsh Government about some of the key milestones that we might expect to see in the programme as we go forward. And then I think we would have to work much more closely with health boards then to understand where they are in terms of progress and ensuring that we've all got clarity through the whole system. I'm imagining that one of the reasons perhaps Welsh Government have asked is because they're looking for a bit more clarity and transparency in terms of where things are, so that they've got that oversight. So that's our in-hospital. I'll pause for a second, David. People can get a word in edgeways, or I can move on to what is largely our out-of-hospital medicines.
Okay, that was a really comprehensive update, Michelle. I don't think we've got any questions. So if you
I'll
want to move on, that'd be great.
Thank you, David. So our electronic prescribing system, like spookily similar names, but this one is for, as I said, outside of hospital. So again, if anyone's tuning in, you may be familiar, you go to your doctors They may prescribe some medications for you. Traditionally, they give you a piece of paper. You take the piece of paper to the pharmacy and the pharmacist turns it into the medication, which you then take away. There's a whole process behind that in terms of what happens to that piece of paper after you've left it at the pharmacy. However, we're moving into the digital age. And I think Sam mentioned it earlier, this is actually rolling out pretty quickly now across the whole of Wales with a lot of support from Sam and her teams on the ground working with our GPs and with our pharmacists so that this whole process can be managed electronically going forward. It's much more efficient. It's hopefully much more helpful for individuals, so you don't have to pick up the prescription from your GP practice. For example, we've added, you can see in the papers, we've got the stats. As I said, this is moving out quite quickly. There are a significant number of prescriptions in the system in any 1 month in NHS Wales. I certainly find some of the numbers quite surprising when you look at them, but that's the level of activity that we're now managing. We are adding functionality now as we move forward. So as well as pursuing the further rollout, we're adding functionality. At the moment, to use this system, you need to decide who is your pharmacy of choice, and your pharmacy of choice needs to be using the system. The majority of pharmacies are, which is the helpful point, but it may be that you don't have a pharmacy of choice, or you want to make that decision on a particular day because of where you're going to be or what's most convenient for you. So we've got now in pilot functionality that will allow you to do that, both to search to see which pharmacies have got this functionality, so I know which one to choose, and can I choose on a one-off basis, so I don't necessarily want to be committed. So that's being added, and there are other aspects of development that we would now like to pursue as we move forward with EPS to make it even more helpful really within the system. So happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Michelle.
Okay.
I can't see any questions. That was again a cooperative update. I can't see any questions, so let's move on. We're back with Sam Lloyd and the Integration Hub. Thank you, Michelle.
Thanks, David. So the integration is a really fundamental underpinning component of our infrastructure. So we operate in an environment where we run over 100 live services within DHCW, and the National Target Architecture work has shown us that there are over 1,400 across the whole of NHS Wales, and many of those systems need to talk to one another in order to exchange information and to allow clinicians to have a view of the patient regardless of where in the system or which health board or which site that patient is being treated in or for what purpose. So integration is really important. We have an integration platform at the moment, which is a proprietary tool that's quite expensive to run, and it comes with a number of limitations and constraints. So we're in the process of building a new tool, which will be an in-house built product, which will replace that and will give us put us in a stronger position where we own the intellectual property. We've got a tool that can scale out, it can be customized to our capabilities and so on. We've recently downgraded the overall status of this to Amber Red, and I'll come on to the reasons for that in a second. So in a sense of what is progressing well with this program, so we have built the technical platform. So we've completed an alpha and a beta phase, and we've got the first production ready integration flow successfully deployed, and that was done back in February. So it is now being used in production. There is live data flowing through the platform. We've obviously got the underpinning cloud environments in place on which this is hosted. We've got some of the monitoring capabilities and message flow capabilities built and working. And we've also got the product roadmap and backlog now established. So we've got some solid technical foundations for the program. We started building this using an external supplier because there's quite a big skills transition element to this work as well. So we needed to bring somebody in who could help us, who could help our internal team upskill and transition their skills to the new platform. For financial reasons, we've exited that supplier now, and that happened at the end of the financial year that's just finished. We're in the process of recruiting some roles that will strengthen and augment the internal team with some of those new skills that we need. That recruitment had taken a little bit longer than we were hoping, but it has now concluded, and we are in the process of onboarding and bringing those people into the team. So the situation is now improving. I think the major constraint that we have is that we do have a contractual end date in June of 2027. So if the timescales for the replacement slip beyond that date, then we will start to incur additional costs, but there are options to look at a reduced procurement at that point. So it isn't necessarily a, we'll incur the full costs of a renewal. So there are some mitigating actions. And this does receive a lot of management attention within my team and within DHCW. So we are doing everything that we can to bring the timescales back on track. We'll be taking a detailed plan and update to our management board in June once those new people are in and up to speed. So we have got a path to green for this, and we are confident that we'll recover. But there might be a small hangover beyond June of next year, which might incur some additional cost. So that is the main risk, I think. Okay,
fine. Any questions for Sam? Okay, so just to be clear, Sam, the resources you need have now joined DHCW. That's correct. Okay. Yeah. So there's a little bit of getting up to speed, and because of that delay we've had, that might have some impact in terms of getting everything off the legacy onto the new. Okay.
Yes.
Cool. Okay. Thank you for that, Sam.
Thank you.
Right. Let's go to Sam Hall then for the last two updates on DSPP and Connecting Care.
Thanks, Chair. So obviously DSPP is now no longer a programme as of the 31st of March, and it's moved into the product world. So what we've been doing in our area now is looking at the backlog, because obviously it's built up a backlog of, that's not a bad thing, a backlog in the product world is a really good thing. Because it means there's lots to do. So we've been looking at that backlog, working out what the priorities are to take forward. During this period, we've also had some obviously some new challenges. We have, as you're aware, we've been building up, which started in Sam's team and has moved across to my team now, building up the in-house app development team. And we've of course hit a recruitment pause, so we can't fulfill the rest of the roles we wanted to bring into the team while we're still in this pause. And at the same time we have the DPIF review of money, therefore we don't have the funding from DPIF to continue with our external support that we had on the app. So we were in a little bit of a quandary. We're trying to work something out around that internally to free up some money so we continue with the app as a priority product for the organisation. Alongside the transition across into product, we've also had to set out new assurance processes for it because there's no longer a programme board around the app. So we've been working with NHSP&I, with Welsh Government policy colleagues, and we have a new structure in place to give us that oversight. So there is effectively a three-tiered approach now. There's an oversight group which has members from senior people from NHSP&I, from Welsh Government, WAST. We have senior clinical representatives on there. We've invited CLICE, the patient voice body, to attend. So quite a significant kind of oversight group. And we've extended it to patient facing, so not just the app, but also any other patient facing tools that we have. So things like DAP. How do we keep improving DAP? Because this is what is it that the patient sees? What are those interactions that our people see, and how do they get that look and feel to be consistent across our products so that they don't jar, so that they're really very simple, very easy to navigate and to understand where you are in the system. So there's a heap of stuff around that to make sure that we are getting the most out of it. And of course, there are other tools that are managed and supported by other organisations like WAST, where we want to work much, much closer with them in the future so that they all link up seamlessly. We are not individual organisations, we are NHS Wales. And so we need to really leverage that for the patient, and leave the badges at the door when you're thinking about the patient. And that is absolutely the right thing we should be doing when we're having these conversations. The first of those meetings is our the 12th of May, so it's in the next couple of weeks, and so that would be great to go through that. And then under that there's obviously the product team, which will look to this is the direction, these are the things we need to start delivering, how are we going to do that in the best way, the most cost effective, and how do we make sure that they're designed with the user in mind, and then right down at the user level, and that's where we have the input from our health board colleagues and from the patients and the people that are actually on the ground that will be using that particular tool. So for instance, if it was a tool or a piece of functionality that was for the for people using mental health tools, for instance, we would want to work with people in that specific area to co-design that piece of functionality with them. So it becomes much more granular in the delivery, but you're likely to get the thing built right because it'll be with the people who need to use it. So it's a much more of it's an on the ground, it should be a much more rapid delivery because you'll be doing that with the people, and hopefully you'll get the things right. We're also aware, of course, and we're doing some work now with our Welsh Government colleagues, that we are likely to have a different government makeup next year, well, in the next couple of weeks, actually, thinking about the timeline now, and we know this is a hot topic and has been, is something that all political parties will be interested in. So we need to be able to make sure that our offer is really clear of where we're going, and that we can really evidence that user-centered design has gone into the choices we're making on what we develop. I'm not sure whether we bring the app back here for updates. Now it's no longer a program, but I'm assuming that's for us to work through once we move on.
Okay. I think we probably will, Sam. I think as part of the change of title to portfolio, because it's still a major piece of work, provided that there is some funding for all the additional enhancements that are in your backlog. So with that said, I'll just pause to see if anybody else has got anything they want to check in on. No. Okay, so if you could conclude these updates then, Sam, with Connecting Care, please.
Okay, thank you. So Connecting Care, we are subject to the same limitations under DPIF. It's entirely funded by DPIF, and so we have quite a small team actually working in Connecting Care because a lot of the delivery is done in the health board. So the added complication that we have is that some of the systems that underpin Connecting Care that are being procured by health boards are also waiting for DPIF funding. Okay. So there is a little bit of a chicken and egg for that. So we're in the same holding pattern that they are. We are doing some critical work that we started at the end of last year, and we are looking at some contingency that I've got elsewhere to try and make sure we can see that through, because it's really important stuff. One of the things is in the mental health space, we really want to get that over the line, and so we are pushing forward on that, but I'll use contingency from somewhere else to make sure that that's done. But after the end of quarter one, if we don't have any clarity around funding, what I'll be looking to do will be to move my team from that into other critical roles, especially during the recruitment pause that we're currently under. Without funding in Connecting Care, I can make, they can give really good value in other spaces in the organisation, and we should be looking to do that. It's really disappointing. I'm really hoping that this is resolved quite quickly, because Connecting Care, the integrated care record, is fundamental to communities by design, and that whole big programme of work that started off by the CMO in Welsh Government. Without the systems in place, it's impossible. You won't be able to do that work. So it's critical for us to get that sorted.
Okay. Fine. Okay. Any Ruth?
So you note the positions in relation to us and the health board, Sam. What about the local authority pieces of work in terms of Connecting Care at the moment?
So the local authorities were slightly ahead in their procurement. So their procurements all started back last year, and they were in a very difficult position because they were about to award contracts, or they'd awarded contracts. So Welsh Government has granted their their money, so they have their funding for this year, 20+ million, I believe. So they are in a different, so they can carry on, they have their funding. But they're only one piece of the picture. Without the mental health piece of the work and without the community health piece of the work, you have an incomplete integrated care record. So you need all the bits really, but yes, they're in a different position.
Okay, great. Okay, thank you for that update, Sam. Can't see any more questions, so we'll draw this section of the agenda to a close. We're, as a committee, being asked to note in the major programme updates. And with that, we'll move on to the last substantive item, which is the corporate risk register. And I'm going to hand over to Chris again for that.
Thank you, David. Yeah, I'm just going to update on the corporate risk register and the position as it relates to the programme's delivery committee. And then I'm just going to come on to some of the asks from the remit letter and the work the board have done and how that relates to this committee at the end. So in terms of the corporate risk register, there's currently 15 risks on the corporate risk register, 7 of which are assigned to this committee by our committee assignment approach. So that's nearly half the corporate risks relate to this committee major programme delivery. I'm going to run through those in turn. Now, as we always put this after the programme updates, because often we cover through the RAG status, the escalation, the risks. I don't want to duplicate. The first one relates to 0237 new requirements impact on resources in the plan. And this one is in the process of coming off the risk register. So this related to the end of last financial year, but the reporting timeline didn't quite mean this had been removed in time. So it's just to note that 0298 delay in the implementation of WLIMS 2.0. I'll run through them and then I'll pause. 0333 WICIS implementation delay, W347 National Target Architecture and Transition Roadmap, 0348 transition to new data architecture, 0349 RADIS team scaling back, and then 0354, which is a new risk, which we have covered today in a bit of detail, which is the DPIF pause and review and the impact that will have potentially on all major, well, not all, but a number of the major programs, including within the portfolio. So I will pause there, David. I'll just see if Michelle wants to comment on anything that hasn't come up through the program reports, and Sam. Michelle?
Yes, thanks, Chris. I was going to say, I think the main ones in our area, I mean, it's probably in the LIMS and RISPs area where we've discussed in quite a lot of detail this morning already, but happy to take any questions on that. Thanks.
Thanks, Michelle. Yeah, I think we have. I just wanted to complete this to make sure we'd gone through. It is just worth noting we have removed 2 risks that were previously assigned to the committee. One related to the delivery of 2025-26 milestones, and well, as Michelle's on the end of 25-26 IMTP delivery position, you probably can update on, hopefully, in terms of percentage.
Yes. Oh, good. You caught me there, Chris. I'm pretty sure it was 94% was our landing position on IMTP. So we landed all of the milestones in the remit letter, and yes, 94% on our IMTP position. So I think with some milestones, again, probably we've discussed the main ones in the committee. Obviously, that was post change control. Some milestones are moved by other parties, but that was our kind of closing position on 25-26.
How does 94% compare to other organisations in terms of IMTP completion? It feels quite high, given that I know we've done a lot of work in previous years to get rid of stuff that just constantly rolls over on IMTPs for years and years and years and never ends.
Yeah, I mean, I'm happy to bring in, hopefully Meg's with us as well, who manages. Actually, you can check my 94%, Megan, and do see if I get it wrong. But I think one of the challenges may be the way in which we present our plan is quite specific in terms we've worked on that to be quite clear about specific milestones, about specific expectations on delivery. The health boards present their plans slightly differently, I think, to that. So they would have a lot more focus on some of the key performance targets that are set by Welsh Government, which would be things like, you know, kind of outpatient waiting times and, you know, as you would expect, care delivery measures. We don't have those, obviously. So I think we have a lot more specificity around the deliverables or the milestones. Is that fair, Meg? I mean, obviously, Meg's worked in the health board as well, so it's helpful to get different views.
I think it's managed quite differently, and the health boards are quite health boards IMTPs are quite narrative, because the IPQD actually picks up the KPIs that they have in terms of waiting lists, and the metrics that they have in terms of performance. So, you know, the feedback has been, and the way that we've laid it out is quite explicit in terms of our mapping back to what the ministerial priorities are, and how we've presented the plan in terms of meeting those objectives.
And I guess just on that point, I think, Ruth, another thing to note, I think the percentage of IMTP delivered has increased year on year for the last 3 or 4 years. So that's a positive step. What it doesn't necessarily show is whether the percentage not achieved are big ticket items that, you know.
That was about to be exactly what I said. Yeah. Is it 94% of the right stuff? Or have we just left all the good stuff in that 6%? So yeah, that's the next question, isn't it?
Yeah, but positive that the increase in terms of year on year. So I think the process is starting to bed in. David, if okay, I'll just move on to the remit letter requirements around risk management and how it relates to programmes and the committee.
Yeah,
just briefly, because I know the board. So as a board, we had a board development session last week. We spent about half of the day on risk escalation, and that was specifically in response to some of the asks in the remit letter. It happened to tie in with our annual review of risk appetite, so the timing was good in that sense. But it very much related to risk tolerance per programme. So we had a discussion. We're going to do some work to make sure SRO programme chair review the risk tolerance per programme. As a board, we looked at risk appetite and tolerance as it related to programmes as a whole in a more kind of holistic sense, but the more granular per programme. Just working through with Ruth and Helen how they want the engagement to take place to do that assessment by programme at a more granular level. We also talked at that session, and going forward we'll implement this about risk escalation. So from a programme delivery perspective, when programmes need to be escalated at the earliest possible stage to Welsh Government, so formal and informal escalation, to make sure they're fully cited when things potentially are going off track, or when there's something that's been identified that could mean deviation from delivery as it relates to timeframes, quality, or delivering within budget. We also talked about system-wide risks, and a lot of our major programmes are system-wide risks, if you like. They involve us working with other NHS bodies and how we flag system-wide risks, and I think that links into the escalation point. So I guess I just wanted to sense check, David, in terms of the run through of the programmes today, is there anything, and I guess I'll look to colleagues here, that we feel, whilst we formalise kind of the approach, is there anything from today's session that we feel needs to be escalated, either formally, informally, or both? The one thing we heard earlier was about LIMS and the potential change of scope there, which seems quite significant, and we talked about making sure that's alerted to Welsh Government. Is there anything else colleagues have picked up that we want to make sure we've escalated at this point? So I'll just pause there, David, and that's the update really in terms of the remit letter. It's work in progress, but we've had a good session and start on it.
Okay, I've got one issue, but I'll just check to see if anybody else has got anything. No, we haven't. So in terms of the DPIF pause and review, we've got multiple examples of the impact that that's going to cause if it goes on for longer. Have we been very explicit to Welsh Government in terms of yes, this is a sensible thing for you to be doing, but there will be impacts on lots of our programs and subsequent potential delays or things might be not even getting done. So have we been, and I'm conscious of the public accountability meeting where, the feeling I got was that they weren't fully cited on these things as they happen. Are we being absolutely crystal clear on the impact that this is having? I'm not saying it's the wrong thing to be doing in terms of what they're doing, but are we absolutely clear with them on the impact it will have on lots of our programs?
Yeah, Michelle, do you want to start, or do you want me to respond to
well,
that?
I'm happy to chip in, and we've provided information in advance of the pause and review, in fact, David. So I'm sure finance colleagues were here would confirm that when we provided the requests, if you like, for next year, that would have been a number of months ago now, and in that we would have indicated the implications of not funding particular aspects. So I guess it's not quite the same as necessarily delay. What we have done, so we've put forward the DDAT reports. So we provide regular reports through the digital governance structure, so through the DDAT delivery board to the DDAT leadership board, which is chaired by Welsh Government with the chief executives, and in those reports we would have started to indicate. So Ivan mentioned earlier about the approach to the RAG rating. We have called that out in those reports now. So we've got that just kind of good timing, I guess. And I think we'll be having that conversation. I would anticipate, Chris, at the delivery board, which is on the 14th of May, I think is coming up a couple of weeks, and then up to the leadership board while the review is going on. And I also mentioned earlier, we are also being quite transparent about that in programme boards. So we had risk board this week, I think, as Alison said, and we're trying to, so we have a shared level of understanding across the system, really. Yeah, so hopefully that covers it.
Thank you, Michelle. Ruth?
I suppose I'm keen to understand in the DPIF pause and review. We've identified a lot of problems, obviously, with the funding not becoming apparent, but within that there are also opportunities to do things differently. So I'm just keen to understand where that analysis sits, because actually, if one program is no longer funded, well, how could we do things differently to ensure that key services can continue? Do you know what I mean? There's a reshaping of the portfolio that there is a version of the reality that is not what we have at the moment. So I'm keen to understand where that opportunities lens is coming into this, because at the moment, and I can understand why we're currently focused on this is going to be difficult if we don't get funding for all these programs that are in train. But if we said, well, actually, should any of these programs be in train, there's a different cut of a portfolio somewhere potentially.
Michelle?
I don't know if that makes sense or not, but hopefully
it really does. No, it really does. And Meg and I have been having those conversations, haven't we, Meg, when we've been doing the return. So I think it's absolutely a really valid point. I think to a degree we're already doing that. I know in my area we're talking about how we prioritise people, so moving people around to priority areas. So we've been doing that for a while. But I would agree with you. I think there are some aspects of the requests that we put forward that are for new work, effectively, and it may be that the new work does not move forward. And then there are aspects that are obviously for work in train or essential replacements, and that is the work that we're now working through. Too many works, which is, if we had to tighten up around the portfolio, how would we move the people around to cover where the key gaps are? What are the absolutely essential things we need to do? Now, I think all of the requests that we put forward relate to milestones, objectives, deliverables in our IMTP. So that is a challenge. So I don't think there's anything in the ask that is outside of what we've put in the IMTP. So we would have to do some reworking on that as well. But we are kind of starting to work through that with the pause and review and the recruitment freeze. Again, those two things sit together, I think, don't they? We are doing that work to understand the different kind of options, I guess, when the funding lands. And really helpful, I think, that we've got early clarity on some of the key areas we've talked about today. So LIMS, RISP, EPMA, EPS, that actually helps us a lot, I think, in terms of the portfolio. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, I think just because it's an our IMTP, I don't think that doesn't make it not an option, right? Because our IMTP is a living document, and given where we are at, given where the new government, whoever they are, will be at, I think understanding that we need to be a bit more fleet of foot on some of this stuff is probably where we should be at.
Okay. Fine.
I'm not saying bin the IMTP. Well, maybe I am saying that. Let's think about it.
Okay, Chris, I'll give you the last word on this, and then we're going to close this meeting.
Thanks, David. Yeah, no, it's just to say, to Ruth's